He gazes downward, his dual-toned hair catching the dim light as he reflects on the path that led to this desolation. Suddenly, a brilliant pillar of light pierces the clouds, bathing the warrior in a celestial glow as he looks toward the heavens. Far from the scars of battle, the serene peaks of Ditol rise majestically, their snow-capped summits touching the clouds in a display of ancient, undisturbed peace. Through the lush undergrowth of these mountains, a small, white creature scurries with purpose, its long ears twitching at every sound. It stops before a low-hanging branch, sniffing intently at a plump, ripening fruit until its companion, a young boy, notices its fixation. He leans in, asking what has caught its attention and if it has found something special. Seeing the longing in the creature's eyes as it stares up at the prize, he reaches out toward the fruit. He asks if this is truly what it wants, his hand poised to retrieve the snack for his friend. With a nimble leap, the boy snatches the fruit from the branch with a triumphant cry. He lands gracefully on the forest floor, the prize held firmly in his hand as his fluffy friend chirps with pure excitement. He offers the treat with a warm smile, holding it out for the creature to see. However, he cautions the little one not to overindulge, warning that eating too much too fast will surely lead to a stomachache. As the creature happily accepts the gift and begins to nibble, the youth turns his gaze toward the horizon. His expression shifts to one of concern as he notes the darkening clouds and the unmistakable scent of an approaching storm. He had sensed the coming tempest, and now its fury lashed against the mountain, turning the forest floor into a treacherous mire for the soldiers marching through the gloom. This sudden deluge caught the Weldaria Kingdom Night Order off guard, prompting their leader, Captain Jace of the 2nd Division, to command a swift retreat into a nearby cave. He marveled at how quickly the sunny skies had vanished, replaced by this relentless downpour that seemed to appear out of nowhere. As they sought shelter, his men whispered about the legendary sword saint rumored to dwell within these uncharted lands, questioning if any mortal could truly survive in such a nightmare of aggressive beasts and volatile weather. Jace remained focused, his gaze fixed on the darkness, certain that the legend they sought was indeed here on Ditol Peak. He abruptly ordered the fire extinguished, his instincts sharpening as the flickering light died out. His subordinates looked on in confusion, but the captain's sudden tension signaled that they were no longer alone in the woods. The warrior narrowed his eyes, every sense heightened as he felt a presence approaching through the veil of rain. Something powerful was drawing near, cutting through the sound of the storm. He drew his blade with a metallic ring, his men following suit as they braced for an encounter. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the rhythmic drumming of water against the leaves. A single footfall splashed into a puddle, marking the arrival of the mysterious visitor. The heavy rain continued to fall, yet the atmosphere shifted, charged with an inexplicable energy. Through the thicket, a figure emerged, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow that pushed back the shadows of the forest. The light seemed to emanate from within, a beacon of calm amidst the raging elements. The captain stood frozen, sweat mingling with the rain on his brow as he felt an overwhelming sword aura radiating from the newcomer. He watched in disbelief as the raindrops seemed to veer away, never once touching the boy who stood before them. He looked up, his youthful face curious rather than hostile, and asked if the weary travelers had come from the kingdom of Weldaria. He stands firm as the knights approach, his youthful face reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution, while the seasoned warriors observe him with intense scrutiny. Because of this encounter, the tall knight steps forward, formally introducing himself as Jade, the captain of the 2nd Division of Weldaria's Night Order. He addresses the boy with the legendary title of Sword Saint Feet, a revelation that leaves the youth visibly shaken. The boy can hardly believe they would risk their lives in such a treacherous place just to seek him out for a request. In response to this display of humility, he agrees to hear their request, prompting a deep, respectful bow of gratitude from the captain. He then looks toward the sky, predicting the storm's end and suggesting they move to a safer location to talk properly, as the surrounding peaks are no place for a long conversation. Moments later, the group begins their trek through the dense, rugged terrain, following the boy's lead. As they walk, the heavy clouds vanish with impossible speed, leaving the knights in awe of the boy's apparent control over the very elements. While they follow, the younger knights whisper among themselves, unable to reconcile the boy's youthful appearance with the legendary status he supposedly holds. Their captain confirms their suspicions, recalling the boy's presence during the human-demon war years ago, and noting with a hint of unease that he hasn't aged a day since. Eventually, they emerge into a hidden, tranquil valley, a stark contrast to the harsh mountains they just traversed, leaving the soldiers breathless at the sight of such a peaceful sanctuary. Suddenly, the peace is shattered by the growl of a lurking beast. As the boy reaches for his blade, the captain stays his hand, sensing the danger himself. He observes the peaceful scene at the watering hole, noting that even the most ferocious monsters refrain from conflict in this rare sanctuary. Hugh, curious about the man's lifestyle, inquires about his sleeping arrangements. In response, the seasoned warrior gestures vaguely to the surrounding wilderness, suggesting that any spot will suffice for a bed. He invites the boy to make himself comfortable, offering tea and a handful of white apples he had gathered earlier in the day. He presents a bountiful pile of the pale fruit, the sheer quantity a testament to the valley's hidden riches. As they settle in, the conversation takes a more serious turn when the knight mentions the national institution dedicated to training the next generation of protectors. Hugh, sensing a deeper motive behind the hospitality, asks directly what is required of him. Standing tall against the horizon is the Royal First Knight Academy of Weldaria, a grand fortress of learning and discipline. He reveals that this prestigious academy, once a source of pride, is now in desperate need of salvation. He explains that the institution is being suffocated by the influence of arrogant noble elites, leaving Q to wonder how a school could possibly be in such peril. The knight describes a toxic environment where talent is cast aside in favor of bloodline, and where those without noble titles are treated as less than human. This systemic corruption is ruining the potential of gifted students who lack the correct lineage. Hearing this, the boy remarks on the persistent flaws of society, while the knight emphasizes that many of the most capable candidates are commoners whose potential is being suppressed. He pleads for the boy's assistance, warning that without a change, the military will stagnate and eventually collapse. Q, now fully attentive, asks for the specific details of the task ahead. The request is bold. Q is to enroll in the academy and systematically dismantle the arrogance of the noble students. The knight believes that seeing someone with no social standing outperform them is the only way to shatter their pride and force a necessary evolution. He spoke with a grim intensity, warning that the entire military structure would crumble if the rot of noble arrogance wasn't excised. Q, however, couldn't help but find the gravity of the situation slightly absurd, a small smirk playing on his lips as the knight's dire predictions filled the air. This amusement quickly erupted into a boisterous laugh that echoed through the clearing, catching the seasoned warriors off guard with its sheer lack of reverence for the weight of their request. He wiped a tear from his eye and summarized the task with blunt simplicity. All he had to do was beat some sense into anyone who tried to step up to him. As he spoke, he took a large, crunching bite of a white apple, his confidence as refreshing as the fruit itself. With a sharp, knowing grin, the boy gave his final word, agreeing to lend his strength to their cause and enter the academy. Seeing the boy's resolve, the knight commander added a final incentive, explaining that the king himself would grant any request as compensation for this service, no matter what it might be. He didn't need to hear anything else, sealing the pact with an enthusiastic shout of agreement while continuing to devour his snack. Not long after, the group set out, their carriage rolling across the plains toward the distant, towering spires of the capital city. The journey was long, but the excitement inside the carriage remained high as they watched the landscape shift from wild forests to the organized chaos of civilization. Upon reaching the city gates, the sheer scale of the hustle and bustle left the young traveler wide-eyed and breathless, his senses assaulted by the vibrant life of the kingdom. They finally entered Central, the heart of the Weldaria kingdom, where the boy was immediately overwhelmed by the exotic sense of street food and the sheer density of the crowd. Jade watched him with a quiet, knowing smile, aware that the real challenge was only just beginning. He watched as the young boy introduced his fluffy companion, Huey, to a bewildered Jace, who seemed taken aback by the creature's sudden appearance. Seeing Jace's hesitation, the boy explained that the creature had simply followed him from the mountains and was completely harmless, despite its energetic nature. He then nudged Jace playfully, suggesting that since they were now technically fellow commoners entering the academy, there was no longer any need for formal speech or rigid titles. Despite the lightheartedness, a flicker of concern crossed the boy's face as he wondered if anyone in the capital might recognize him. But Jace quickly dismissed the thought, noting that his face was virtually unknown in this kingdom. Jace's expression turned serious as he reminded his companion that the Sword Saint's presence must remain a closely guarded secret for the time being. As their carriage pulled up to the grand entrance of the palace, Jace issued one final warning for the boy to keep a low profile and avoid drawing unnecessary attention to himself. Inside the throne room, they were granted an audience with King Andrew Seville Weldaria, who welcomed the legendary Sword Saint with formal gratitude, apologizing for not being able to meet them personally during their long journey. Unfazed by the royal presence, the boy grinned and told the king he should relax, remarking that the stiff atmosphere of the palace would have been stifling otherwise, much to the shock of the surrounding guards. This casual remark incensed Clifford Lightning, who stepped forward with a roar, demanding that the boy show proper respect to his majesty regardless of his status as a guest. Before the situation could escalate, the seasoned commander intervened, ordering Clifford to stand down and reminding him that the boy was an honored guest of the crown and should be treated as such. He stands firm as Clifford's voice rings through the hall, filled with venomous disbelief. The knight rants about the war 7 years ago, dismissing the others as weaklings and refusing to accept that a mere commoner could hold the title of Sword Saint, questioning how the nation's fate could be entrusted to such a person. Despite the outburst, the young knight merely smirks, his gaze fixed on the boy with a mixture of condescension and challenge, while the boy stares back, his patience clearly wearing thin. The tension is suddenly shattered by a booming command from the throne as the king demands silence, his voice echoing with an authority that instantly stills the room and leaves the knight gasping in surprise. With the room quieted, the elderly monarch offers a sincere apology for the shameful display, though the boy simply sighs, finding the formal posturing and the knight's arrogance more of a nuisance than a threat. Turning to more pressing matters, the king reveals troubling news regarding the kingdom of Iviltread, the demon nation, noting their unusual activity and the gathering of powerful warriors across the continent. Dark shadows of monstrous figures loom in his mind as he expresses his growing fear that the demons are once again preparing for a full-scale war. He stresses that survival depends entirely on unity between nobles and commoners alike, a sentiment that clearly sits ill with the young knight, who remains silent and brooding. Unable to contain his pride any longer, the knight erupts, declaring that bloodline is what truly rules the land, and that he would never entrust their future to someone he deems unworthy, regardless of the legends. The boy can't help but let out a mocking laugh at the knight's obsession with status, which only serves to push the soldier past his breaking point. Driven by a blind need to prove his superiority, the knight draws his blade, his eyes burning with a cold resolve as he challenges the boy to a duel, intent on showing that the title of Sword Saint is nothing more than a relic of a forgotten era. He accepts the challenge with a sharp, knowing grin, noting that this direct approach will be much faster anyway. As the knight demands he draw his weapon, the boy simply waves a hand in dismissal, claiming he has no need for a blade. With a cheerful, almost carefree expression, he clarifies his stance, stating plainly that he has moved beyond the use of swords entirely. The knight is incensed by the perceived insult of facing an unarmed opponent, but the elder Sword Saint calmly advises him to simply watch the display. Consumed by a sudden, violent rage, the challenger bellows, demanding to know if he is being mocked by such a blatant display of overconfidence. He lunges forward with a murderous cry, his blade a silver streak, yet the boy weaves through the assault with a grace that leaves the onlookers breathless. In a display of impossible skill, the youth catches the descending steel with his bare hand, coldly informing the knight that his talent is being wasted on a cause that has warped his very blade. Maintaining his composure, he offers a final, chilling promise. He will demonstrate the true essence of a sword saint's technique. The knight's mind begins to fracture under the weight of his humiliation, unable to process how a mere commoner child could possibly stand against him. With a final, desperate roar, he watches in horror as his pride and his weapon are shattered in a single, decisive moment. He falls to his knees, the weight of his defeat heavy upon his shoulders as his sword clatters uselessly against the stone floor. Hugh stands before him, casual and unbothered, having proven his point without even drawing a blade. Seeing the duel concluded, the young boy turns to his mentor with a triumphant grin, reminding him that he had promised everything would be fine. Jade remains stoic, his gaze shifting between the humbled knight and the boy whose power continues to defy expectation. The defeated knight finally lowers his head in a formal admission of loss, his voice quiet as he utters the words of surrender. In contrast, his opponent radiates a playful energy, seemingly more interested in the next adventure than the glory of his victory. From his throne, the king extends a hand in a gesture of formal recognition, declaring that the boy's strength has been undeniably proven and officially acknowledging him as a sword saint. The tension in the room shifts from conflict to a heavy, expectant silence. The monarch continues, offering to grant a request as a reward for this display of mastery once the current formalities are concluded. The boy's eyes light up with excitement, his laughter ringing through the hall at the sheer generosity of the offer. He raises a finger as a thought takes hold, his expression shifting from simple joy to a more focused intent. He makes his request known. He wants the crown to lend him the service of another. When asked for clarification, he emphasizes that he doesn't just want any soldier, but someone truly powerful, the absolute pinnacle of martial skill. Jade watches closely, sensing a deeper purpose behind the seemingly simple request. The hall seems to echo with the weight of the request, as the minds of those present turn to the various legends and formidable warriors who serve the kingdom, wondering who could possibly satisfy such a demand. With a sharp, determined look, the boy points toward himself, clarifying that his goal is to face the single strongest individual in the entire country. He asks what he would have them do, his voice dropping to a more serious tone as he prepares to reveal his true desire. A wide, almost manic smile spreads across his face as he delivers his final, shocking condition. He wants this ultimate warrior to try their absolute best to end his life, a request that leaves the entire throne room in stunned silence. Feet arrives at the massive gates of the Royal First Knight Academy in the Weldaria Kingdom. He is wide-eyed and breathless, taking in the scale of the castle-like structure with pure wonder. Beside him, his escort watches his reaction, noting the boy's genuine amazement at the prestigious institution. The man accompanying him remains troubled by the youth's earlier, chilling admission of wanting to kill. He silently questions what truly drives the boy. Is it a simple hunger for the thrill of fighting someone stronger, or has he grown weary of a life where he has already become the strongest, seeking an end to his own isolation through conflict? He watches as the young man's excitement boils over at the sight of the bustling crowds within the academy grounds. Feet is eager to test himself against so many potential opponents, his energy nearly uncontrollable, but the older man sternly reminds him to maintain restraint and hold back his power for the time being. Turning to the business at hand, he officially informs the boy that, as of today, he is a first-year student enrolled in the elite class A. Feet receives the news with a casual, almost dismissive expression, seemingly unimpressed by the prestige of his placement. The man then lays out the primary mission. Feet must climb the ranks until he stands at the very top of the academy's hierarchy. It is a challenge the youth accepts with a sharp, confident grin, his eyes fixed on the path of the sword that lies ahead of him. He warns the newcomer that the journey will be fraught with difficulty, as he will have to push back against the immense pressure of the nobility who dominate the school. In this environment, it is an exceedingly rare occurrence for a commoner to even earn a rank, let alone reach the summit. The boy smirks, realizing his companion had underestimated his grasp of the situation. He bluntly summarizes the path to victory. To succeed, he must utterly crush the nobles with such overwhelming strength that their status and lineage become completely irrelevant. With that settled, he prepares to head off and handle the competition immediately. His escort quickly interjects, telling him to wait because a designated guide is supposed to arrive at any moment to assist with his orientation. He pauses, the term guide sounding foreign and unnecessary to him. In the distance, a figure begins to approach, signaling the arrival of the person who will lead him into his new life within the academy walls. He stands back as a powerful presence approaches, her arrival marked by a sense of history and weight. Jace greets the newcomer warmly, noting it has been some time since their last meeting, while the woman reciprocates the sentiment with a composed nod. As the two women face each other, the guide introduces the newcomer to the young man as Lady Arya Redtail, the head of the academy. Jace, with a polite smile, acknowledges the honor of meeting the legendary sword saint, while Arya reveals she has already been briefed on the youth's unique situation and is prepared to offer her support. Turning her attention directly to the youth, she offers a rare compliment, noting that she can sense his inherent strength just by looking at him. He meets her gaze with a confident smirk, seemingly unfazed by the high praise from such a renowned figure, his small companion perched quietly on his shoulder. Because of the weight of her words, the guide leans in to whisper to the boy, emphasizing that such a compliment is significant given her history. He explains that she once led the First Division of the Night Order, a position that demands the highest level of martial prowess and leadership. This reputation was forged in the fires of the Human-Demon War, where she earned the title Arya of the 100 Blossoms. The legends say she once cut down 100 elite warriors single-handedly, a feat that cemented her status as a living legend among the knights. Hearing this, he is struck by a sudden realization and asks if she was truly Jace's superior in the past. Jace confirms this with a calm nod, clarifying that Arya was indeed her former boss, which explains the deep respect between them. In response to his surprise, the guide chuckles, noting that despite her youthful appearance, her authority is absolute. Jace reinforces this, stating that she has entrusted the entire academy's future to Lady Arya's capable hands, urging the boy to follow her lead. Moments later, she decides it is time to move forward, announcing that she will personally escort the new student to his classroom. She specifies that he will be joining the elite first-year Class A placement that reflects the high expectations placed upon him despite his commoner background. Standing before the grand architecture of the institution, she spreads her arms in a welcoming gesture. She officially invites him into the fold, marking the beginning of his journey within the prestigious walls of the Royal First Night Academy. Finally, Jace offers a warm, supportive smile as she concludes the formalities. With a gentle expression, she declares that as headmistress, she officially approves his transfer, sealing his fate as a student of the academy. She leads the way through the cavernous halls of the academy, watching as the young man's jaw drops at the sheer scale of the architecture. She explains that such a vast space is necessary to house the hundreds of aspiring knights who train within these walls. The Royal First Night Academy is more than just a school. It is a prestigious 3-year program dedicated to forging the strongest knights in the kingdom. With a student body exceeding 300, it stands as the largest and most significant swordsmanship institution in the realm. Sensing his awe, she playfully warns him about a student who once vanished in these very corridors, only to be found days later as nothing but skin and bones. He trembles at the thought, fearing he might suffer the same fate, before she admits with a smirk that she was only kidding. Despite her reassurance, the boy remains visibly rattled, muttering that her sense of humor is far from comforting. As he chases after his small, rabbit-like companion, she watches his retreating figure with a calculating gaze. To any casual observer, he appears to be nothing more than an ordinary, energetic youth. Yet, beneath that mundane exterior, she perceives something extraordinary, a sword aura so refined and powerful that it pierces the very air. It is the kind of presence one would expect from a sage who has spent millennia in meditation, not a mere boy. Her internal analysis is interrupted by the sharp click of boots and the rustle of a heavy cloak as the sword saint approaches. Suddenly, the air erupts in a violent surge of motion as the legendary warrior draws her blade with blinding speed. The sheer pressure of the movement forces a gasp from the headmistress, who struggles to maintain her composure against the overwhelming display of martial prowess. The saint brings her weapon to a halt, the tip inches from the ground, and coolly asks if the observation is complete. Caught off guard, she can only offer a quiet apology for her wandering thoughts. She stood in the polished hallway, admitting with a sharp edge to her voice that her sudden display of power was a deliberate test of the headmistress's capabilities. Jace accepted the remark with a composed nod, acknowledging the weight of the sword saint's scrutiny. Her expression shifted into a predatory grin as she leaned in, voicing a desire to face the headmistress in a proper duel one day. Jace's composure wavered for a fraction of a second, a small twitch near her eye betraying her internal reaction to the blatant challenge. Because of this overwhelming pressure, the headmistress found her hand trembling against her side, her fingers tightening around her belt in a silent admission of defeat. She realized with a bitter internal sting that the gap in their power was so vast, she hadn't even been able to draw her weapon before the encounter ended. Turning away from the confrontation, she called out to the young transfer student, who was looking around the grand corridor with a dazed and confused expression. He seemed completely out of his element, blinking rapidly as he tried to make sense of the massive academy's layout. He followed her lead as she gestured toward their destination, informing him that his placement in Class A was just ahead. The boy grumbled under his breath, annoyed that she hadn't shared this information sooner, while the small creature on his shoulder watched the exchange with wide eyes. Moments later, they arrived at a sprawling lecture hall where dozens of students sat at tiered desks, the air thick with the quiet murmur of academic preparation. The room was a sea of uniforms, each student a potential rival or ally in the rigorous path of a knight. As she stepped through the heavy doors, the room fell silent, the students' attention snapping toward the headmistress. Among them, Rebecca watched with a cold, unreadable gaze, her posture perfect as she waited to see the reason for this unexpected interruption. The instructor at the front of the room paused his lesson, granting her the floor with a respectful nod. She took her place at the podium, her presence commanding the absolute focus of every aspiring knight in the hall. With a formal gesture, she introduced the newcomer, announcing to the gathered elite that a new classmate would be joining their ranks effective immediately. Beside her, the boy stood ready, his presence a stark contrast to the disciplined atmosphere of the room. He burst forward with an exuberant energy, flashing a wide, confident grin as he introduced himself as Feet with a friendly wave and a casual greeting. He made his presence known, seemingly oblivious to the weight of the expectations placed upon the students of Class A. He looks around in surprise as a sudden, heavy silence falls over the classroom. Even his small companion lets out a startled chirp, sensing the immediate shift in the atmosphere. The quiet is shattered by the sharp crack of a hand slamming against a wooden desk. Low whispers immediately ripple through the tiered seating as the elite students question the identity of the newcomer, noting his lack of a family name and wondering if a mere commoner has truly entered their ranks. Rising from her seat with a look of indignant fury, the noblewoman demands an explanation from the headmistress, questioning if this elite class wasn't reserved strictly for those of high birth. The headmistress remains unmoved, coolly stating that no such restrictive rule exists within the academy's charter. She continues her explanation, clarifying that placement in Class A is determined solely by academic and martial ranking. It is merely a coincidence, she notes, that the highest-ranked students happen to be of noble descent, a fact that does not preclude others from earning their place. Unconvinced and visibly bristling, the young noblewoman presses further, asking if the headmistress is truly suggesting that this outsider possesses skills equal to their own. To her, the very idea that a commoner could be on par with the elite is an unacceptable insult to their status. He responds to the doubt with a wide, confident grin, casually asserting that he is likely stronger than anyone currently in the room. His nonchalant attitude and bold claim only serve to further provoke the elite students surrounding him. The boast is the final straw, prompting one of the students to draw his blade with a metallic ring. The sharp point of the weapon bites into the floorboards, a clear and violent challenge to the newcomer's perceived arrogance. Before the situation can escalate into bloodshed, the headmistress's voice cuts through the tension like a blade. Her gaze, sharp and commanding behind her spectacles, demands immediate obedience as she orders the students to cease their aggression. She reminds the class that drawing a weapon without explicit permission is a direct violation of academy regulations. Despite the reprimand, the noblewoman argues that allowing such blatant gloating to go unpunished would be an unfair stain on their honor and the academy's standards. Seeing an opportunity to resolve the conflict through tradition, the headmistress proposes a formal solution. She suggests they settle the matter the knight's way, with a sanctioned duel to prove who truly deserves their place among the elite. She begins to name the challenger, but the young transfer student interrupts with a confident grin, noting that his path forward is simple. He just needs to win the fight. She turns her attention to the front of the room, calling upon the top-ranked student and asking if she accepts the challenge. She doesn't hesitate, her eyes narrowing with a cold, sharp intensity as she vows to ensure the commoner never darkens the doorway of Class A again. Her fierce declaration brings a knowing smile to the headmistress's face, who declares the matter officially settled. She addresses the entire assembly, announcing that the duel will commence in 30 minutes, allowing the tension in the room to reach a fever pitch. Continuing her instructions, she explains that the second training ground will be the venue, and that all classes are suspended so that the other students may witness the spectacle. After dismissing the class, she instructs the newcomer to follow her, leaving the stunned students behind. Watching her lead the way, the boy follows as the air fills with the hushed whispers of his new classmates, leaving him to wonder what is truly happening. Behind him, the challenger remains still, her gaze fixed on his departing back with a look of unwavering resolve. Unaware of her lingering gaze, the boy questions the headmistress once they are alone, asking if she orchestrated the scene to test his commitment to the king's plan. He listens quietly as the headmistress reflects on her past, admitting that while she once hoped to effect change personally, she no longer possesses the strength for the front lines. She shifts the conversation to his upcoming opponent, identifying her as Rebecca Lightning, a scion of the renowned Lightning family, and urges him to maintain his focus on the impending duel. The name strikes a chord with him, prompting a moment of recognition as he realizes she is the younger sister of the famous royal knight, Clifford Lightning. Noticing his reaction, she inquires if he is familiar with the knight, to which he cryptically responds that they share a bit of history. She continues her assessment, noting that while Cliff is formidable, Rebecca possesses even greater potential, having already secured the 10th rank in the academy despite being only a first-year student. He smacks his fist into his palm with a sharp crack, exhilarated by the prospect of testing himself against such a high-ranking adversary so soon. A predatory grin spreads across his face as he considers himself fortunate to have such a challenge laid before him. With a final, dismissive click of her tongue, she turns to depart, leaving him to prepare for the trial ahead. Moments later, they stand facing each other in the center of the arena while the headmistress watches from the balcony above, declaring that she will witness the duel and that victory will be decided by surrender or loss of consciousness. She stares at him in disbelief, finally breaking the silence to demand where he has hidden his weapon, only to be met with a look of casual indifference. She narrows her eyes in suspicion, questioning if his lack of a weapon is a calculated insult to her status. He responds with a casual, carefree shrug, clarifying that he simply does not use a sword in combat. He continues his explanation as the crowd watches from the stands, his tone remaining light and conversational despite the heavy atmosphere of the arena. He leans in with a confident, almost predatory grin, declaring that a blade isn't necessary to defeat someone of her caliber. Her face contorts with sharp indignation at the blatant disrespect, her pride clearly wounded by his words. She tightens her grip on her rapier, accepting the challenge with a cold, focused intensity as she signals that the time for talk has ended. As the noblewoman prepares herself, the headmistress gives the command to begin, and immediately, the challenger becomes a blur of motion, lunging across the stone floor with explosive speed. She strikes with blinding speed, her rapier whistling through the air in a series of precise thrusts, yet the young man moves with an uncanny fluidity, narrowly avoiding the lethal steel with minimal effort. He suddenly closes the distance in a move that defies logic, his hand moving to intercept the blade directly. Her eyes widen in utter disbelief as her strike is neutralized by his bare skin, her momentum completely halted. He stares back at her with wide, manic eyes and a sharp-toothed smile, suggesting they take their time and savor the thrill of the combat rather than ending it so quickly. Word of a duel spreads like wildfire through the academy corridors. Students hurry toward the training grounds, their voices hushed with disbelief as they discuss the news. Rebecca, a ranked noble, is facing off against the new transfer student, a mere commoner. They urge each other to move faster, fearing they might miss the spectacle. The idea of a commoner defeating someone of Rebecca's standing seems impossible to them, yet the curiosity is palpable as they rush past a silent, observant peer. She stands frozen for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. The very notion of a duel between a commoner and a noble is enough to give her pause, her expression clouded with a mix of surprise and concern. At the training grounds, a vast crowd has already gathered, forming a silent perimeter around the central arena. All eyes are fixed on the two figures standing in the middle of the stark, white floor, the tension in the air thick enough to touch. There, the impossible has already occurred. He has caught her blade with his bare hand. Rebecca stares in wide-eyed shock, her breath hitching as she realizes her strike was not only stopped, but neutralized by his sheer physical prowess. In a fit of frustration, she pulls back and launches a flurry of strikes, her movements a blur of steel. He, however, remains unfazed, dodging each blow with a series of precise, minimal movements that border on effortless. He continues to evade her, his voice calm as he critiques her technique. While he admits her speed is impressive, he points out that her movements are far too predictable for someone of her class, a comment that only fuels her growing rage. She erupts in a scream of fury, demanding he remains silent as she channels her inner power. Crackling energy begins to surge around her, the air vibrating with the intensity of the Lightning family's signature magic. With a sudden burst of speed, she executes the flash step, a high-level technique meant to end the fight in an instant. Yet, to the astonishment of the onlookers, he reads the trajectory perfectly on his very first attempt, shifting his body just enough to avoid the lethal strike. He catches his breath, his chest heaving from the exertion of the previous exchange. Across from him, his opponent's gaze is fixed and predatory, her eye wide with a mix of shock and rising competitive fervor. She demands that he stop holding back and face her with everything he has. He, however, remains casual, suggesting they take a moment to reset their positions before continuing the bout. His performance does not go unnoticed by the headmistress, who finds herself genuinely impressed by the display. She notes that dodging the Lightning family's signature thrust on a first attempt is a feat few could claim, let alone following it up with an immediate and precise counterattack. She watches as the young noblewoman lowers her guard slightly, admitting that her previous assessment of the transfer student was incorrect and that he truly does belong in the elite Class A. He responds with a cheerful grin, glad to have proven his worth, while she reflects on the fact that, until this moment, no one had ever successfully evaded that particular strike. Her expression suddenly hardens, her eyes narrowing as a new resolve takes hold. She warns him that while his agility is remarkable, simply dodging her attacks will not be enough to secure a victory in this duel. Her intent is clear to the headmistress, who senses a shift in the air and realizes that the young noble is about to escalate the fight by utilizing a more advanced technique. He senses the change as well, his playful demeanor vanishing as he braces for whatever is coming next. His eyes drop to her feet as she shifts her weight with a sharp click of her heels against the stone floor, preparing to unleash a devastating maneuver. A blinding pillar of energy erupts from her position, dwarfing the small figure standing before her. She lets out a fierce cry, commanding him to be crushed under the weight of her power. She stands at the center of the hammer of the Thunder Emperor, the ground itself seeming to buckle under the intensity of the Lightning family's secret art. Her rapier is channeled with overwhelming energy, manifesting as a crushing weight. Her display of power only serves to widen his grin, as he doesn't look intimidated in the slightest. He remarks that he had suspected she was capable of such a feat, identifying the technique as her Batu. He is referring to the Batu, an advanced art where a swordsman channels their latent internal power directly through their blade, manifesting it as a physical force. The headmistress observes the manifestation, noting the purity of the energy being channeled. She observes the duel with a knowing smile, marveling at the young student's ability to command such immense power so early in her training. Because of this display, the young man watches as the elegant rapier transforms into a massive, heavy hammer. He remarks that while turning a blade into a blunt instrument lacks the traditional grace of a knight, Her talent is undeniable. She doesn't deny the lack of tradition, admitting a simple fondness for the raw strength the weapon provides. He can only smirk in response, finding the admission perfectly in character. Concerned for his safety, she warns him once more to arm himself, but he remains defiant. He dismisses her worry, challenging her to strike with lethal intent. Her jaw tightens at his stubbornness, her patience finally reaching its limit. Calling him a fool, she launches herself forward, the weight of the massive hammer seemingly no burden to her speed. With a thunderous cry, she brings the weapon down in a devastating strike. The sheer velocity of the attack catches him off guard, leaving him barely a moment to react. The impact shatters the ground, sending a surge of electricity through the air. From the sidelines, the headmistress analyzes the move, noting the lethal combination of a high-speed physical blow and the following shockwave. She continues her internal assessment, recognizing the strategic brilliance of the technique. Even a successful dodge offers no escape from the radiating lightning. As the dust settles, the young man stands amidst the crackling energy, fascinated by the strange tingling sensation. Across from him, the noblewoman is stunned that he remains standing, while the headmistress watches with a satisfied smirk. She watches from the sidelines as Rebecca charges, her mind racing with confusion over the strange opponent she faces. Suddenly, the girl leaps into the air, her weapon crackling with energy as she invokes a powerful thunder release upon the ground. She follows through with a devastating Reiko strike, certain that her opponent's only option was to jump directly into her trap. However, the young man maneuvers through the air with impossible grace, leaving her to recoil from the sheer force of her own dissipated energy. Observing the exchange, the headmistress notes that he is actually channeling the lightning through his own frame to enhance his speed, a revelation that leaves his opponent speechless. He stands there with a confident smirk, prompting her to declare that she has seen more than enough of this display. Before anyone can react, he lunges forward with blinding speed, catching the noblewoman off guard as he announces his intent to retaliate. He executes a bladeless slash, shattering the legendary hammer of the Thunder Emperor with nothing but his bare hands, much to her absolute horror. The victor then looms over her, acknowledging her potential, but firmly stating that the victory belongs to him this day. He brings his fist to a halt just inches from her face, leaving her trembling in the wake of his overwhelming power. He holds his position, his fist a mere hair's breadth from her nose, the air still crackling with the remnants of his explosive strike. Rebecca stands frozen, clutching the useless, shattered remains of her once mighty hammer. The young man maintains his stance, a wide, confident grin spreading across his face as he stares her down, his knuckles still white from the force of the blow. Seeing the futility of the situation, she lets the broken hilt slip from her fingers, the heavy metal clattering against the stone floor as she shuts her eyes, accepting the reality of her defeat. With a heavy heart and a raised hand, she finally speaks the words that stun the arena, declaring her surrender and acknowledging the commoner's overwhelming strength. High above the arena floor, the headmistress watches the conclusion with a stoic expression, gently stroking the small creature in her arms while the surrounding students struggle to process the impossible outcome. From the announcer's balcony, the official's voice booms across the stadium, formally declaring that Rebecca has forfeited the match, cementing the upset. She stares down at the fragments of her legendary weapon, the weight of her loss visible in the slight slump of her shoulders and her quiet, contemplative gaze. The official's voice rings out once more, naming the victor as Feet, who stands in the center of the ring, bathed in the light of his unexpected triumph. A wave of disbelief ripples through the crowd of noble students, their faces twisted in shock as they whisper frantically about how a mere commoner could have achieved such a victory. Unfazed by the murmurs of the crowd, the victor flashes a jubilant double peace sign and a beaming smile, fully embracing the joy of his hard-won victory. He has left the arena in a state of disbelief, leaving students like the young woman clutching her books to grapple with the impossible reality. A commoner has actually defeated a noble. Her knuckles whiten as she leans against the wall, her mind racing with the implications of such an upset. From a balcony overlooking the grounds, a heavy boot stomps down in irritation as the victor's distant cheers echo through the air. A sharp click of the tongue betrays the observer's growing annoyance at the spectacle below. Lounging nearby, Wolf Fengman bites into a burger with casual disregard, his eyes fixed on the aftermath. He scoffs at the idea that the girl who ranked so high in her first year could fall to a commoner who doesn't even carry a blade. He continues to chew, pointing out that her loss as the 10th rank reflects poorly on the rest of the elite. When he tries to engage Lily Silver in the conversation, she shuts him down instantly, demanding he refrain from such casual familiarity. Undeterred by her icy reception, he leans back and asks if she believes she could best the newcomer. She offers no immediate reply, her expression as frozen and unreadable as ever, prompting him to remark on her persistent coldness. She snaps her book shut with a definitive thud, finally breaking her silence. While she concedes that the commoner's physical prowess is impressive, she dismisses him as a true threat if brute strength is his only asset. Her gaze sharpens, a cold light gleaming in her eyes as she declares with absolute certainty that there is no possibility of her suffering a similar defeat. Hearing this, Wolf breaks into a wide, predatory grin, finding her confidence perfectly suited for a rank 4. He mirrors her sentiment, asserting that he has no intention of losing to such an upstart either. The morning sun shines over the academy as the energetic transfer student greets the day with a boisterous shout. With his small companion perched on his shoulder, he waves enthusiastically at his peers, though his friendly greeting is met with a noticeable lack of warmth from those around him. Despite his efforts to be social, the other students pointedly ignore him, turning their backs or whispering amongst themselves. Even those he directly addresses seem to find him beneath their notice, leaving him standing alone in the hallway as they walk away in silence. Amidst this cold reception, a familiar figure approaches, though she seems preoccupied with a slight cough. He turns in surprise, his eyes widening as he recognizes the noble swordswoman who had previously challenged him. He doesn't hesitate to offer her a bright greeting, remarking on what a great day it is. She, however, seems caught off guard by his unabashed friendliness, her expression a mix of confusion and slight embarrassment as she struggles to respond. As they walk together, she observes that the entire student body appears to be avoiding him. He admits with a small, sheepish smile that it does feel a bit lonely being the academy's pariah, though he tries to maintain his upbeat demeanor. The weight of yesterday's events still hangs heavy in the air, as the memory of the confrontation and the shocked faces of the onlookers resurfaces. The tension between the commoner and the elite students remains palpable, fueled by the unexpected outcome of their duel. The mockery isn't just silent. Some students openly jeer as he passes, labeling him a loser who doesn't know his place. They watch from the sidelines, their disdain clear in their voices as they mock his attempts to fit in. The whispers follow him like a shadow, with groups of students snickering and questioning who this newcomer thinks he is. The atmosphere is thick with judgment and exclusion, making every step through the halls a trial. Turning her gaze downward, she confesses the deep shame she feels for losing to a commoner who doesn't even carry a blade. He tries to lift her spirits, insisting that she is still far stronger than the rest of the students and shouldn't let the loss define her worth. She looks at him with renewed curiosity, questioning his choice to remain unarmed in such a hostile environment. He simply smiles, noting that while he'd love to defend himself against the insults, he prefers to go without a weapon for the time being, trusting in his own strength. He looks on in confusion as the young noblewoman offers an unexpected apology. She insists that if anyone should be grateful, it is her, admitting her own inexperience despite her rank. Clenching her fist tightly against her chest, she confesses that his victory proved a vital lesson. Bloodline alone does not dictate one's mastery of the blade. This realization has forced her to confront her own previous arrogance. Following this admission, she bows deeply before him, a gesture of profound humility that stands in stark contrast to her earlier coldness. As she rises, her gaze is steady and filled with a newfound resolve, declaring her intent to treat him with the respect he has earned. He, however, dismisses the need for such formality, beaming as he recalls how much fun their duel actually was. With a wide, infectious grin, he extends his hand, suggesting they test their skills against each other again in the future. She accepts, her own expression softening into a genuine smile as their hands meet in a firm pact of mutual respect. Later, amidst the quiet of the training grounds, her curiosity gets the better of her as she asks how he managed that peculiar hand strike during their fight. He offers a casual shrug, suggesting it might be easier to simply demonstrate the technique than to explain it. Stepping toward a row of heavy training targets, he begins to reveal the secret behind his power. He explains that the fundamental trick lies in how one directs their internal energy. She follows his logic, noting that every swordsman learns to channel their inner power through a blade to enhance its sharpness and durability. It is the very foundation of their martial art. Exactly, he agrees, his posture shifting as he prepares to strike. He poses a rhetorical question, wondering why that same energy couldn't be applied to other things, like his own limbs, before unleashing a devastating blow that sends a shockwave through the air. Stunned by the display, she can only stare in disbelief, arguing that the concept of channeling sword energy directly into one's own body is completely unheard of and utterly ridiculous. He merely laughs it off, encouraging her to give it a try herself. She listens as the young man explains the core of his philosophy. A hand strike is essentially a blade. While she admits the utility of such a skill should one lose their weapon, the concept remains foreign to her traditional training. He continues, standing tall and explaining that by channeling energy through the entire body, one's very skin can become as resilient as armor, leaving no gaps in defense. Because the theory is so radical, he suggests she start small, instructing her to focus the energy into her arm and visualize it transforming into a sharp edge. She tentatively agrees to try. Extending her arm, she begins the attempt, her expression hardening with focus as she tries to manipulate the energy in this unheard of way. The air around her hand seems to still as she concentrates, while her mentor watches closely, his usual grin replaced by a look of keen observation. Gritting her teeth, she finds the process incredibly intense, the strain of the internal flow causing her to break into a cold sweat as she pushes her limits. Suddenly, the effort becomes too much, and she stumbles back, gasping for air as her body recoils from the shock. He catches her, remarking on how close she came, though she can only glare back in exhaustion. As she recovers, the realization of the technique's danger sets in. Sword energy is traditionally meant for steel blades because they can withstand the pressure, whereas even a fraction of that flow is already making her bones ache. She looks at him with newfound awe, finally grasping the sheer impossibility of what he does. He doesn't just channel it into a limb, but through his entire being without a hint of strain. He offers a word of encouragement, reminding her that every new skill is difficult at the start, before demonstrating the true power of the technique with a devastatingly fast strike that cuts through the air. He finds his hardened limb locked against a fierce blade, the force of the impact vibrating through his body after his presence was detected. The attacker, a sneering young man, seems impressed that his strike was parried by bare flesh, mockingly suggesting that he should learn to hide his energy better if he ever hopes to land a successful ambush. The sneering warrior doesn't linger, leaping back with predatory agility to create distance before launching into a series of acrobatic maneuvers. As he touches down, the tension in the air thickens, leaving Rebecca frozen in disbelief at the sight of the intruder. The man, identified as Wolf Fangman, merely scoffs at her reaction, demanding the respect he feels is owed to a senior of his rank. He follows his taunt with a blindingly fast lunge, a strike so swift it barely registers before it is evaded. While the onlookers watch in stunned silence, he offers a jagged compliment to the transfer student's reflexes, his eyes gleaming with newfound interest. Standing with an air of unshakable confidence, the warrior's identity as the fifth-ranked student in the academy is made clear, casting a long shadow over the training grounds. His presence doesn't intimidate the transfer student, who steps forward to demand why a high-ranking elite would go out of his way to harass Rebecca. The question causes the senior's smirk to falter, replaced by a look of genuine annoyance. He merely lets out a dark, dismissive chuckle when the newcomer points out that his target is currently unarmed, showing no remorse for his lopsided aggression. He suddenly erupts in a fit of arrogant rage, declaring that the very existence of those he deems weaklings is an affront to his senses. To him, people like Rebecca are nothing more than trash that must be purged to maintain the Academy's standards. Despite the warnings from Lily about the Academy's prohibition on personal duels, he scoffs at the notion, asserting that strength is the only law that truly matters. He decides to rein in his bloodlust for the moment, noting that he won't be going all out today. Closing the gap in an instant, he leans in to whisper a challenge directly to the transfer student, claiming he is only looking for a bit of amusement. When asked if this is a formal invitation to a duel, he merely grins, leaving the threat hanging in the air. He dismisses the immediate confrontation, waving a hand dismissively as he states that now is not the time for their clash. Rebecca and the others watch him, confused by his sudden change in demeanor. The high-ranking student raises a finger, explaining that in 1 month, the Academy will hold a selection battle to determine representatives for the prestigious Academy Tournament, a national event held in Weldaria. He relishes the thought, noting that on that day, participants are encouraged to use their full strength against anyone they choose. He continues his dark description, painting a picture of a crowd-pleasing carnage where some combatants are broken so thoroughly they can never hold a blade again. To him, this official event is the perfect stage to eliminate his rival permanently, a prospect that the transfer student meets with a calm, knowing response. He is met with a steady gaze as the young commoner agrees to the terms, his voice steady as he accepts the challenge for the upcoming tournament. His companions stand by, witnessing the formalization of this dangerous pact. He remains unmoved as the aggressor turns his venomous attention back to the noblewoman, pointing a finger at her and declaring his hatred for those who prey on the weak. The bully vows to keep hounding her until she is reduced to tears and begging for mercy, but she simply glares back, her resolve hardening. They are interrupted as a cold fire ignites in the transfer student's gaze, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone as he makes it clear that he has no intention of letting this insult go unpunished. He is met with a predatory grin as the rank 5 student leans in close, warning the filthy commoner not to run away when the time comes. Far from being intimidated, the youth finds the prospect of the coming battle genuinely entertaining. They part ways as the antagonist turns his back and strides away, leaving the group in the quiet aftermath of his departure. Once he is gone, the noblewoman offers a sincere word of thanks for the intervention, though her gratitude catches the young man off guard. He finds it strange that she is being kind now, especially since she seemed indifferent when he had insulted her himself earlier. She remains speechless as he explains that his anger stemmed from seeing a friend in danger of being hurt, a revelation that leaves her processing his unexpected loyalty. She stammers, her face flushing as the weight of the word friend sinks in, a concept seemingly foreign to her noble upbringing. Nearby, the small creature Q leaps with joyful energy, landing squarely atop Lily's head and prompting a startled cry from the girl. Feet can't help but burst into laughter at the chaotic, light-hearted scene, his earlier tension completely vanished. He watches as the young woman smiles warmly, gently cradling the rabbit-like creature. With a soft, sincere expression, she asks if he would be willing to extend that same friendship to her also. The group stands together in the courtyard, the atmosphere shifting from the previous confrontation to one of newfound camaraderie. Meanwhile, the rival watches them from a distance, a sharp, predatory smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. The mention of the upcoming selection battle clearly lingers in his mind, fueling a dark anticipation for the conflict to come. He turns away, the shadows of the hallway partially obscuring his face as he contemplates the challenge he issued. In contrast to the rival's malice, the spiky-haired youth wears a grin of his own, his eyes sparkling with a mix of defiance and excitement. To him, the escalating stakes and the looming duel aren't a burden, but a thrill that makes his new life at the Academy truly worth living. He welcomes the chaos, sensing that the path ahead will be anything but dull. The group walks through the Academy grounds, with the young transfer student leading the way with his usual boundless energy, while his companions follow close behind. Turning to him, the noblewoman asks with a hint of hesitation if he would like her to show him around the local town, her gaze lingering on him as she awaits his response. He reacts with immediate, physical enthusiasm, causing her to recoil in embarrassment as she pleads for him to maintain decorum in public. She quickly regains her composure, crossing her arms and insisting that her offer is merely a matter of convenience since she already intended to purchase a new sword for herself anyway. Before they depart for the tour, however, She suggests they engage in a bit of preliminary training to sharpen their skills, though her proposal is cut short by a sudden noise. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by the sounds of a struggle nearby, drawing their attention toward a group of students gathered in the courtyard where a confrontation is unfolding. There, the aggressive rank 5 student is relentlessly pressing an attack against a struggling classmate, mocking her lack of strength as she gasps for breath. He continues his verbal assault, sneering at the commoner's perceived uselessness and mocking her for even trying to fight back, while his companion watches the one-sided duel in silence. With a final, forceful strike, he sends the girl's weapon flying from her hands, leaving her completely defenseless and trembling on the ground. Just as the situation escalates, the transfer student steps into the fray, catching a practice blade and questioning the nature of this training while offering to join the match himself. He stands his ground, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he offers the group of upperclassmen a chance at a match. The students recoil in confusion, whispering amongst themselves about the commoner who somehow secured a spot in the prestigious Class A. He is met with a sudden lunge from one of the challengers, who hopes that defeating a Class A student will earn them a promotion. The attacker misses completely as the young man hops away with a casual, effortless grace. He follows through with a swift counter that sends his opponent sprawling, looking almost surprised by how easily the blow landed. The rest of the group is left reeling, their bravado shattered by the ease with which their comrade was dispatched. They flee the scene in a panic just as Rebecca and Lily arrive to investigate the commotion, noting with disdain that Class B students were picking on those they deemed weaker. Their presence encourages a young girl to step forward, her eyes wide with gratitude as she introduces herself as Neko, a first year from Class D. Her revelation about the existence of a Class D leaves him momentarily stunned, struggling to grasp the Academy's complex hierarchy and the fact that there are students even lower ranked than his recent attackers. He snaps out of his daze as she continues, confirming that she recognizes both him and Rebecca from their previous exploits. She explains that witnessing his duel against a ranked student gave her, a fellow commoner, the courage to keep going despite the Academy's harsh social structure. She expresses her deep gratitude, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and relief. To her, speaking with someone like him feels almost like a dream, as she has admired his strength from afar for quite some time. He, caught off guard by the sudden intensity of her praise, can only offer a surprised exclamation as she continues to pour out her heart. As the young girl gathers herself, the noblewoman approaches to return the sword that had been knocked away during the earlier scuffle. She asks with a hint of concern if the commoner students are always subjected to such harsh treatment by their peers. With a somber look, the girl admits that the nobility generally holds little affection for those of her standing, a harsh reality of the Academy's social divide. The noblewoman gazes off into the distance, reflecting on how a desperate cling to status can warp a person's soul into something grotesque. Her companion notices the sudden shift in her mood and inquires if something is troubling her. She simply shakes her head, realizing that her own view of the world had been far too limited until this very moment. Closing her eyes, she finds herself in quiet agreement with the internal shift she is experiencing. While she remains lost in thought, the young man's attention shifts back to their new acquaintance, noting with a casual air how remarkably flexible her body seems to be. He is immediately met with a sharp rebuke from the noblewoman, who misinterprets his observation as something far more scandalous. She calls him a fool, indignantly clarifying that she was referring to the girl's physical form and combat potential, not whatever crude thought she assumed he was harboring. The commoner girl looks on, completely bewildered by the sudden tension between the two, while the noblewoman's mind is already racing with a new realization. She recalls the way the girl fought, realizing that despite taking a barrage of blows, she didn't seem injured at all because she was skillfully redirecting the impact through her joints. The girl herself confirms this, admitting that while she lacks raw power, she takes great pride in her natural suppleness. It is a realization that leaves the noblewoman frustrated, viewing such a unique defensive talent as a waste if not paired with offensive capability. Elsewhere, a seasoned warrior observes the unfolding dynamics of the Academy, noting that the world is far from lacking in gifted individuals among the common folk. Back at the training grounds, the young man ponders this truth, a spark of ambition lighting up his eyes as he wonders if the entire foundation of the noble system would crumble if more commoners began to assert their hidden potential. Turning his gaze back to the girl, he calls out her name, causing her to jump in surprise. When the noblewoman asks what he is plotting now, he simply brushes it off as thinking out loud, though the weight of his words lingers in the air. He leans in with a confident grin, casually asking the young girl if the upcoming selection battle has caught her interest. The question leaves her stunned, her eyes widening as she realizes he is referring to the prestigious tournament that determines who will represent them at the Academy level. Seeing her hesitation, he offers a bold solution: she should train alongside them. While the girl stammers about her own perceived weakness, the noblewoman nearby expresses shock at how quickly the situation is escalating, though she remains firm in her own resolve to enter the fray and prove her worth. The young commoner remains fearful, noting how easily they are dismissed by others, a sentiment the noblewoman echoes as she reflects on how a single defeat has led everyone to treat her as a failure. He, however, is undeterred, laughing as he tells them to imagine the shocked expressions on their detractors' faces if all three of them manage to secure a spot in the tournament. Despite his enthusiasm, the girl remains terrified of being crushed, a concern validated by the silver-haired student who warns that such a move is essentially a declaration of war against the entire noble hierarchy. Sensing her genuine fear, he softens his tone, assuring her that she is under no obligation to participate if she truly does not wish to. His expression then shifts to one of intense, burning conviction as he promises her that if even the smallest part of her desires to become more than she is, he has the means to make that growth a reality. This offer triggers a memory of her departure from home, where her loved ones offered a place of retreat if things became too difficult, and a protective figure vowed to defend her against any noble who dared to mistreat her. Driven by those memories and the weight of her own aspirations, she realizes she cannot turn back. She must push forward and find the strength she needs to survive in this world. She reflects on her time at the academy, a period marked only by pain and a crushing sense of powerlessness. Despite having her own reasons for staying, she has been unable to stop the misery, leading her to wonder if a transformation is truly possible for someone like her. With tears welling in her eyes and a desperate hope in her voice, she asks the question that has been haunting her. Can she actually become strong? In response, the young man turns to both her and the noblewoman, offering a piece of cryptic but firm advice. He explains that as long as their resolve remains true and untwisted, their weapons will provide the answers they seek. He continues, looking directly at the two of them, acknowledging the weight of the path they are about to take together. Standing tall between his two companions, he boldly declares their shared ambition. They are going to turn the entire academy upside down. Elsewhere in the school, the atmosphere is thick with resentment as other students watch the trio depart. They mutter bitterly about the commoners and their growing arrogance, wondering what the group plans to do next. Amidst this tension, a group of noble students accidentally collides with a massive, cloaked figure in the corridor. While the nobles immediately begin to bark insults about commoners and cheating, the stranger's gaze remains cold and predatory. The towering figure looms over the trembling students, his presence radiating a palpable sense of danger. He dismissively tells them that he will let them off easy today, leaving the young nobles paralyzed with fear. As the giant walks away, a smaller, equally mysterious companion follows, whining about missing out on the action. In the distance, the noble student's arrogant facade has completely crumbled into a scream of terror. The larger man offers a chilling apology to his partner, promising that the next victim will be theirs to deal with entirely as they please. He and his companion retreat into the shadows of the narrow alleyway, their grim work for the moment finished. As their forms fade into the darkness, the focus shifts to a new presence. Her fingers, adorned with dark polish, carefully hold a card bearing a distinct signature. She gazes at it with a chilling intensity, her youthful features set in a mask of cold anticipation as she breathes a promise that she cannot wait for the events to follow. The bustling city surrounding the Royal Academy is alive with activity, its cobblestone streets filled with citizens and students going about their daily lives. Amidst the crowd, the noblewoman and the young girl from Class D stand by a central fountain, their eyes scanning the area for a familiar face that has yet to arrive. She sighs, her brow furrowed in frustration as she admits her inability to grasp the commoner's unpredictable nature, while her companion trembles with social anxiety, questioning her own presence in such high-ranking company. The tension between them grows palpable. The younger girl is practically vibrating with awkwardness, her face slick with nervous sweat as the silence between them stretches on uncomfortably. Her mind drifts back to how this situation began, recalling how the energetic youth had invited her along for a tour, only for her to realize that the prestigious Rank 1 student would also be joining their excursion, making her feel entirely out of place. Back in the present, the blonde knight grows increasingly impatient, decrying the lack of discipline in the one who requested a guide only to keep them waiting for so long, while the small creature beside them watches the square with equal anticipation. Suddenly, her eyes light up as she spots a figure in the distance, raising her hand to call out a greeting across the busy square to the person they have been waiting for. As the figure draws closer, the young girl's relief turns to confusion, noting that something about his silhouette seems remarkably strange and bulky. He finally stumbles into view, breathless and nearly buried under a mountain of overflowing grocery bags, offering a sheepish apology for losing his way in the winding streets of the city. The sight of him practically disappearing behind the massive haul of food leaves the noblewoman speechless for only a moment before she demands to know why he has turned a simple tour into a major shopping expedition. He explains his predicament, recounting how a simple quest for directions in the market turned into an avalanche of generosity from the locals. Rebecca stares at the mountain of supplies, questioning the practicality of lugging it all through their city tour, while Neko can't help but giggle at the absurdity. The young man's panic rises as his companion bluntly calls him an idiot for his inability to say no. He protests, claiming the merchants were so insistent that refusal felt impossible, his face contorting in a mix of embarrassment and overwhelm. Seeing his distress, the noblewoman sighs and decides to intervene, promising to summon a servant from her household to handle the burden. Neko watches the exchange, her initial awe of the legendary figure slightly dampened by this display of social clumsiness. A wave of relief washes over him as the weight of his mistake is lifted, and he wipes his brow with a triumphant grin. He feels truly rescued from the consequences of his own kindness. She warns him sternly to be more careful, noting that the entire town seems to lose its head whenever he is left unsupervised. He merely laughs, his carefree nature unshaken by the lecture. As they prepare to move on, she asks for a destination, warning that without a plan, they will be wandering aimlessly until nightfall. He pauses to consider their options, tapping his chin thoughtfully. With a sudden burst of inspiration, he points forward and declares that their first stop must be somewhere with excellent food. His small, furry companion chirps loudly in agreement, sharing his enthusiasm for a good meal. The creature suddenly leaps into the young girl's arms, startling her before she realizes how soft and endearing it is. He introduces his friend, Q, explaining that the little one was simply asleep when they first met. The small beast settles in, closing its eyes and drifting into a peaceful slumber. Because it is so unusual for a wild creature to be this trusting, Neko marvels at the connection. He explains that Q's comfort is a rare sign of acceptance, as his wild instincts usually keep him wary of strangers until a bond is truly formed. He listens intently as Neko ponders if the creature's immediate affection stems from the unique quality of her sword aura, a concept that leaves Rebecca visibly startled and questioning her own presence. He listens as she explains that Q is drawn to warm auras, noting how a swordsman's inner nature manifests physically, whether it be warm, cold, thick, or thin, a revelation about the spiritual side of combat that is entirely new to him. She is then asked about his own presence, and she beams, concluding that her own aura must be warm, while bluntly describing Rebecca's as crackly, much to the noblewoman's horror and disbelief. This realization hits her hard, as she finally understands why the small creature refuses to rest upon her head, though the young man quickly offers a word of encouragement, suggesting the beast might eventually warm up to her. Despite his optimistic words, a shadow of doubt lingers on his face as the two girls continue their exchange, wondering if the creature's instincts are truly that discerning. He remains silent while she reflects internally on the nature of these energies, acknowledging that while a warm aura suggests a certain softness of character, Rebecca's sharp, crackling energy is far superior for the heat of actual combat. She continues the conversation as they walk through the town, the bond between the two young women seemingly strengthening through this strange new understanding of their own spirits. They are watched from a short distance by the young man, who feels a surge of anticipation, genuinely eager to witness how their skills and spirits will develop in the days to come. He then makes a practical suggestion, declaring that since the creature has taken such a liking to Neko, she should be the one to choose their dining destination, catching her completely off guard. He sees her quickly recover, offering a shy, hesitant agreement as she prepares to lead them toward a place she knows. She leads the group to a modest-looking establishment, expressing a hint of uncertainty about whether the place will meet the standards of her more aristocratic companions. Inside, the atmosphere is lively and warm, filled with the sounds of a busy kitchen and the chatter of patrons as a waitress deftly navigates the room with a tray of frothing mugs. Their doubts vanish the moment a towering, multi-layered hamburger is placed before them, its sheer size and savory aroma drawing gasps of wonder from the trio. While the others are eager to dig in, the noblewoman stares at the dish in bewilderment, questioning how one is even supposed to consume such a thing without the aid of a knife and fork. Her companion quickly corrects her, explaining that utensils have no place here. Seeing her hesitation, the young girl gleefully demonstrates the proper technique, gripping the massive sandwich with both hands as the others watch in disbelief. Without a moment's delay, she sinks her teeth into the burger, taking a colossal bite that leaves no room for further explanation. The joy is infectious, and soon the table is a scene of pure culinary bliss, with even the small creature joining in on the feast as they savor the rich flavors. Encouraged by the display, the energetic youth urges his companion to cast aside her reservations and experience the meal for herself, prompting her to finally reach for the burger. She tentatively brings the food to her lips and takes a bite, her initial skepticism giving way to the physical sensation of the meal. Her eyes widen in an instant of pure revelation, the unexpected quality of the commoner's fare clearly shattering her preconceived notions. She takes a large bite, her eyes widening as the flavors of the commoner's meal overwhelm her senses, forcing a quiet admission of how delicious it truly is. Seeing her enjoyment, the young girl points out a bit of sauce on the noblewoman's nose, causing her to flush with embarrassment and demand that the others look away from her unrefined state. Nearby, the small creature lies on its back, completely satiated, while the girl wonders aloud if city dwellers are always blessed with such incredible food. The young man clarifies that he isn't actually from the city, but hails from a place called the Sacred Peak. This revelation catches the girl off guard, as she has never heard of such a location, prompting him to explain that it is a hidden settlement tucked away near the mountain's summit. A sudden tension fills the air as he catches a sharp, questioning look from his companion, leading to a moment of nervous hesitation. He lets out a breath of relief once the scrutiny passes, while she simply continues her meal, musing that she had no idea such remote places even existed. His focus is abruptly pulled away by a faint, unsettling sound, his gaze sharpening as he tries to identify the source of his sudden unease. Looking around the room, he realizes the once bustling restaurant has fallen into a chilling, unnatural silence, with the other patrons nowhere to be seen. He voices his concern about the eerie quiet, a sentiment she quickly echoes as she senses the shift in the atmosphere and asks for an explanation. Sensing an immediate threat, he stands and firmly declares that they need to leave the establishment at once. He reacts instantly as a massive fist whistles through the air, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow from the hooded giant. The smaller assailant watches from the side, surprised by the young man's agility as the restaurant's quiet is shattered by the sudden violence. The smaller thug's eyes widen in shock as he attempts to grapple with him, finding the boy's arm to be as unyielding as solid iron. His larger companion growls a warning to stop playing around, realizing that their target isn't the defenseless commoner they expected, especially after a hidden blade nearly finds its mark. Recognizing the shift in the air, the group realizes they are facing professional killers rather than mere street thugs. The tension thickens as the attackers regroup, their eyes locked onto their prey with a newfound, lethal focus. In the heat of the moment, she steps forward with a determined gaze, declaring her intention to hold the line while the others escape. He counters immediately, insisting that he will provide the distraction so she and the young girl can flee the shop safely. Though she notes that these enemies have a dangerous bite, they find themselves cornered within the trash dining area, the exit blocked by the imposing figures of their would-be assassins. It becomes clear to him that the attackers have no intention of letting anyone leave the premises alive, regardless of their choices. The two men begin to bicker over their prizes, with the smaller one complaining about a change in their original agreement. The giant silences him with a predatory grin, deciding then and there that he will be the one to take down the primary target. Seeing the threat escalate, she pulls the trembling girl closer, shielding her from the leering gazes of the mercenaries. The air hums with the sound of shifting fabric as they prepare for the inevitable clash. The thugs reach a crude agreement, divvying up the targets between them with sickening confidence. They laugh at the prospect of an easy victory, completely disregarding the martial prowess of the students before them. The giant licks his lips in anticipation, his expression twisted into a mask of pure malice as he stares down his opponent. She can only grimace in disgust, regretting that they hadn't stopped at a weapon shop before this encounter began. With a sudden burst of speed, the battle truly begins as he lunges forward, his movements a blur of calculated aggression. The sound of clashing steel and heavy impacts fills the room as the two sides finally collide in earnest. Rebecca calls out to feet as the thick dust from the initial clash begins to settle, her voice sharp with concern amidst the wreckage of the restaurant. She and Neko are suddenly lunged at by the massive, hooded giant, who roars with a predatory grin as he targets them, viewing the young students as nothing more than fresh prey. He grunts in frustration as his brute force is met with unexpected resistance, while Rebecca urgently commands Neko to keep her focus and redirect the momentum of the incoming strike. She manages to parry the massive blade with a precise movement, her eyes widening in pure shock and delight at her own success as the heavy weapon slides harmlessly past her. She receives a quick word of praise from her senior before Rebecca leaps into action, her movements a blur of practiced grace as she prepares to capitalize on the opening Neko created. She delivers a powerful strike that sends the hulking mercenary reeling backward, his heavy boots skidding across the floorboards as he groans from the impact. She remains tense, her brow furrowed as she realizes that a single blow won't be nearly enough to put a monster of his size down for good. The smaller assailant shifts his position, his movements quick and opportunistic as he looks for a gap in their defenses while the giant recovers. The noblewoman insists they retreat immediately, grabbing Neko and ignoring the younger girl's hesitant glance back toward the center of the fray. She offers a final, somewhat uncertain reassurance that their companion will be fine, even as Feet stands alone against the remaining threats in the wreckage. Feet stands calmly while the seasoned warrior winces, clutching his side. The man confirms that his ribs are indeed cracked, a testament to the strange, powerful techniques the youth employs. Internally, the young man reflects on the striking similarity between his own methods and those of the mysterious woman he encountered earlier. He begins to walk forward, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence of the hallway. With a casual air, he asks the gathered host if he is indeed the target they were sent to eliminate. The mercenaries tighten their grips on their weapons, acknowledging the challenge as they prepare to engage. A dark, predatory grin spreads across his face as he suggests they make the encounter entertaining. The sheer intensity in his eyes causes the nearest attackers to break into a cold sweat, their initial bravado crumbling as they realize he isn't bluffing about his capabilities. Despite the warning signs, one of the assailants claims him as her personal prey, driven by a reckless impatience. He simply tells those in his way to move, ignoring the mockery of a thug who questions what an unarmed boy could possibly achieve against cold steel. The air whistles as a blade swings toward him, but he vanishes in a blur of motion, reappearing safely to the side. The attacker's eyes widen in disbelief at the impossible speed, while the youth offers a backhanded compliment, noting that they at least possess the skills of professionals. Realizing that the youth is far from an ordinary opponent, the mercenaries decide to abandon any sense of individual honor and attack in unison. One of them snarls in frustration, his face contorted with rage at being toyed with by someone so young. One of the smaller figures prepares to strike, noting that if their leader, the one known as Crocodile, has given the order, they have no choice but to follow through. The target welcomes the challenge, his eyes gleaming with anticipation as he dares them to show him the full extent of their power. They lunge from all sides, their weapons converging on him in a lethal web of steel. A roar of fury fills the air as they commit to the kill, certain that no one could escape such a coordinated and overwhelming assault. He is already gone, his silhouette a mere shadow against the light as he leaps high above their heads. With a chillingly calm voice, he whispers that their efforts were simply not enough, leaving them striking at nothing but empty air. He descends from his leap, the force of his movement creating a thunderous impact as he touches the ground. This display of agility only serves to further incense the massive mercenary, who snarls about never being so blatantly mocked. He demands that the young man show him what a true professional is capable of, while the youth lets out a sharp grunt of exertion. Seeing his partner's rage, the smaller hooded figure decides they have had enough of these games. He urges his companion to end the confrontation immediately, his patience finally exhausted. With a predatory glint in their eyes, the duo prepares their final assault. The smaller one shouts for the giant to tear their opponent apart, invoking the name of a lethal technique meant to crush the life out of its target. They move in perfect synchronization, a rarity for such disparate fighters, and reveal a complex, segmented weapon that snakes through the air. It has been a long time since they were forced to rely on this coordinated maneuver. Instead of showing fear, the young man's grin only widens as he observes their unique combat style. He finds the challenge refreshing, noting that the battle is finally becoming interesting. The segmented blades lash out like a living thing, seeking to ensnare him, but he remains a blur of motion. He nimbly avoids every strike, even as the mercenaries taunt him, wondering how long his confidence will last. He scoffs at their efforts, calling them fools for thinking such predictable patterns could catch him. In a flash of speed, he declares the skirmish over, positioning himself to end the fight. Desperate, the mercenaries unleash their most devastating move, a crushing pincer attack they call the Death Bite. They boast that the strike carries over 2 tons of force, certain that no one has ever survived such a concentrated blow. Yet, he catches the massive strike with ease, his expression shifting from amusement to boredom. He sighs, remarking that if this is the pinnacle of their strength, the entire encounter has been a disappointment. He effortlessly disengages, leaping back with a nimble hop that leaves his attackers reeling in confusion. The smaller mercenary shrieks at his partner, demanding to know why the target was allowed to escape their grasp, while the larger man can only stare in mute shock at the impossibility of what just occurred. Standing a few paces away, he spreads his arms wide in a mocking gesture of vulnerability, pointing out that he is completely unguarded. The mercenaries exchange frantic, whispered theories, unable to comprehend how a mere commoner could possess such raw power without the aid of a blade or the specialized techniques of a knight. His expression shifts into a predatory grin, his eyes gleaming with a wild, infectious confidence as he issues a direct challenge for them to try their luck once more. This display of sheer audacity leaves the two men paralyzed, sweat beading on their brows as they realize the terrifying gap in strength between them and their supposed prey. They can only watch in despair as he decides the diversion has reached its conclusion, offering a cheerful farewell just as a series of bone-crunching impacts send the mercenaries sprawling across the stone floor with agonized cries. With the immediate threat neutralized, he turns his attention to the segmented weapon still skittering across the ground, his hand reaching out with practiced precision. He tracks the metallic clatter of the snake-like blade as it retreats, his gaze narrowing until he finds the perfect opening to strike. Launching himself forward, he delivers a devastating low kick, a technique born of pure physical force rather than swordsmanship that connects with a dull thud. He watches as the impact shatters the momentum of the mechanical serpent, pinning the weapon to the floor and leaving the remaining mercenary gasping in terror at the sight of his broken tool. Looking down at the defeated youth, he meets a gaze filled with tearful rage as the smaller mercenary screams about his fallen brother, cursing the brat who dismantled their lives in a matter of moments. He and his fellow mercenaries find themselves overwhelmed by a relentless assault as the young commoner lunges forward, his hands blurred in a dual-pronged strike known as the swordless twin strike. The speed of the maneuver leaves the mohawked mercenary frozen, his own blade still half-sheathed as the air whistles around him. Before he can even process the failure of his quick-draw technique, the youth is inches from his face, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he declares the battle finished. Without a moment's hesitation, the boy follows through with a devastating swordless thrust, channeling his momentum into a single, concentrated point. The impact is brutal, catching the mercenary squarely in the chest and forcing a pained grunt from his lungs as he is sent reeling backward. With the skirmish concluded, the group gathers in the quiet street. The young girl informs them that the city guards are already on their way, while the massive, sharp-toothed mercenary glares up from the ground in silent defeat. Turning his attention to the captive, the boy demands to know the reason for the ambush, a sentiment echoed by the noblewoman who insists on uncovering the motive behind the targeted attack. The large man merely spits back a defiant refusal, his eyes narrowing as he makes it clear that no amount of questioning will loosen his tongue. Frustrated by the sudden wall of silence, the youth complains about how quickly the man abandoned his bravado, while his companion stands ready to take more drastic measures. Though she casually suggests torture to extract the truth, the boy dismisses the idea, recognizing the hardened resolve in the mercenary's eyes and knowing that such a man will not break easily. He remains the center of attention as the noblewoman questions who among them would even have the stomach for the interrogation required. Neko quietly agrees, her voice small as she admits she feels the same way. With a heavy sigh, she decides they should simply wait for the guards to arrive, reasoning that they likely wouldn't extract any useful information from the mercenaries in their current state anyway. As she watches the commoner, she realizes his strength is undeniable. He is at the very least on par with the Academy's elite. To have faced such dangerous opponents and emerged without a single scratch is a feat few could manage. Her gaze sharpens, fixed on him with a mixture of suspicion and growing curiosity about the secrets he might be keeping. Beside her, the young girl stares at the boy's back, the same question echoing in her mind. Who is this person, really? Far from the scene of the skirmish, in a room of opulence, a high-ranking student named Brad Metalrog seethes with rage. He dismisses the mercenaries as useless trash, incensed that they could lose to a mere commoner after demanding such a high price for their services. He grinds his teeth, the humiliation of the defeat burning within him as he vows that the commoner will pay for this slight, no matter the cost. He listens as his companion clarifies that she isn't seeking a life. Instead, she wants the boy publicly shamed. She believes that if the commoner is thoroughly humiliated within the academy, he will be forced to flee the kingdom in disgrace, and she tasks Brad with handling the matter. She continues, suggesting that simple humiliation might not suffice, as the boy appears to be concealing his true identity. He lets out a sharp, mocking laugh at the suggestion, concluding that if they can expose the boy's supposed strength as nothing more than a facade, he will have no reason left to remain. He bows low, his voice thick with a mix of genuine deference and practiced humility as he offers his apologies. The woman stands tall, her expression cold and unyielding as she warns him not to overstep his bounds, commanding him to simply do as he is told. Moments later, he remains in his subservient position, staring silently into a basin of glowing embers as the weight of her authority settles over the room. He listens intently as his master commands him to set his trap and do whatever is necessary to ruin the commoner's life, expressing her absolute reliance on him as her prized disciple. With a sinister glint in his eyes and a confident smirk, he accepts the dark task, vowing to live up to her expectations and ensure the transfer student's downfall. The sun shines over the spires of the academy, a place of learning now shadowed by recent violence. Inside a quiet room, the investigator in the textured vest sets down his tea, his expression grim as he reviews the report. The two assassins who ambushed Phi were well known in the underworld, yet they were the ones who ended up defeated. He watches as his companion, the woman with the dark, wavy hair, takes a slow sip from her cup, her eyes thoughtful behind her glasses. She points out that the client must have known Phi's true strength as a sword saint, even if the assassins themselves were professionals who wouldn't easily betray their employer. She continues her analysis, noting that while many nobles still dismiss the young man as a mere commoner, it is highly irregular for someone to hire such high-profile killers for a simple assassination. A memory of an arrogant youth with goggles comes to mind as a potential link. She is met with a nod of agreement from the investigator, who then asks if she has any specific suspicions or leads they should follow. He and his allies sit across from each other in the spacious office, surrounded by the weight of their responsibilities. They narrow their search to the limited number of people who actually know the truth about Phi's identity, specifically the knights present during the royal audience, including the sharp-eyed woman known as Lil Icevale. He looks down, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face as he considers the possibility of a traitor among his own ranks. When questioned about his discomfort, he admits his idealism might be a weakness. He resolves to carry out his duty, stating that he will handle the internal investigation while she maintains her watch over the academy. He concludes the meeting, entrusting the next steps to his colleague as he prepares to depart. The door clicks shut behind him, leaving the woman with her thoughts and a steaming cup of tea. As he strides down the hallway, she remains behind, her gaze lingering on the empty space he occupied. She reflects grimly on the nature of their enemies, certain that those bold enough to target a life will not be deterred by a single failure. Outside, the imposing spires of the academy reach toward the sky, guarded by silent stone sentinels. The weight of the situation hangs heavy in the air, a silent acknowledgement that preventative measures must be established before the brewing storm breaks. Meanwhile, in the bustling courtyard, the atmosphere is far less somber as students gather for the upcoming trials. One young man pushes through the crowd with arrogant confidence, loudly proclaiming to anyone who will listen that he is the one destined to face Rebecca in the next duel. His bravado is quickly put to the test in the training ring, where the clash of steel rings out. The exchange is swift and brutal. A powerful strike sends him reeling backward, his feet skidding across the stone floor as he struggles to maintain his balance. Standing over him with effortless grace, Lil Icevale lowers her blade, the duel clearly decided. She observes her fallen opponent with a cool, detached expression, noting that the bout has reached its inevitable conclusion. Her victory is immediately met with cheers from Neko and their companion, who rush forward to celebrate her third consecutive win. Lil Icevale accepts their praise with a modest nod, though her focus remains sharp and disciplined. She attributes her success to the fine craftsmanship of her new sword and the rigorous daily training she has endured. Her eyes gleam with a mix of pride and determination, confident that this momentum will carry her through the selection matches. However, her expression soon hardens as she warns her friends that the path ahead will not be so easily traversed. Even as Neko and the others look on with surprise, she remains grounded, sensing the true challenges that still lie in wait. Far from the excitement of the training grounds, Rebecca stands in a quiet corridor, staring out at the horizon. She is a solitary figure framed by the large windows, lost in thought as the sun casts long shadows across the floor. She gazes out from the high balcony, her thoughts as distant as the horizon. Below her, the younger students are deep in conversation, explaining to the newcomer that the formidable woman they just encountered is Lil Icevale, the fourth-ranked prodigy of the academy. He takes in this news with a sharp, calculating look, his interest clearly piqued by the prospect of facing such a high-ranking opponent. She reflects on her own journey, acknowledging a past defeat that taught her the true meaning of strength, while the girls nearby worry that their commoner roots are the cause of the icy reception they often face. She tightens her grip, her resolve visible in the sharp set of her eyes. He realizes that the upcoming selection matches are more than just a test. They are the stage for a long-awaited revenge match. He lets out a spirited cry, rallying the group to throw themselves into their training with everything they have. The others join in, though the sudden outburst leaves some feeling a bit self-conscious. She can only watch with a mix of exhaustion and amusement, wondering where they find such endless reserves of energy. As they head off to the training grounds, a pair of silent figures watch from the shadows of the corridor, their intentions hidden as they track the student's progress. He is drenched in sweat by the time the sun begins to set, his body aching but his spirit high after a productive session. In the midst of the post-training chatter, Neko realizes with a start that she has left her jacket behind. They watch him walk away, noting the undeniable change in his posture and aura. He has grown remarkably strong, fueled by a new sense of confidence that makes him almost unrecognizable from the boy he once was. Lil Icevale questions their chances in the upcoming selection battle, her voice tinged with a rare moment of doubt as she looks toward Rebecca, wondering if they truly have what it takes to emerge victorious. Suddenly, the tension is shattered when a familiar, arrogant figure lunges forward, catching the high-ranking student off guard with a sudden, playful jab that sends her reeling in surprise. He lets out a boisterous laugh, offering a half-hearted apology while she glares back, demanding to know the meaning of his sudden and unwelcome intrusion. Ignoring her indignation, he begins to lecture her on the finer points of combat, explaining that her rigid posture is a hindrance. True mastery of the blade requires a fluid relaxation that she currently lacks, as force alone is insufficient for a truly sharp strike. With a casual pat on her shoulder, he suggests a simple remedy for her nerves, closing her eyes and focusing on something as mundane as her next meal, leaving her momentarily stunned by the unorthodox but strangely grounded advice. As he saunters away with his usual carefree gait, she can only watch in silence, reflecting on his persistent eccentricity while the weight of his words begins to sink in. The grand spires of the academy loom overhead as the countdown to the selection battle reaches its final 2 weeks, leaving the students with no choice but to push themselves to their absolute limits. Elsewhere in the halls, the young attendant Neko retraces her steps, her brow furrowed as she searches frantically for the item she misplaced earlier in the day. Her search finally ends in a quiet corridor where she discovers her discarded jacket, a wave of relief washing over her as she gathers her belongings. That relief is instantly replaced by a cold dread when she catches sight of a group of older students approaching, her eyes widening in terror as she recognizes the formidable presence of the one they call Fangman. The antagonist, Fangman, stands casually with his group, tossing a small bag back to Neko. He offers a mockingly polite gesture, telling her he's returning her property. She catches the item, her expression clouded with suspicion as she asks what business they could possibly have with her. In response, a cruel, wide grin spreads across his face, his teeth bared in a predatory display of intent. He begins to laugh, mocking her for even considering entering the selection battle. He questions her audacity, his tone dripping with condescension as he labels her a clueless fool. Suddenly, his demeanor shifts from mockery to aggression as he lunges forward, seizing her by the collar. He snarls that commoners like her are nothing but an eyesore in his presence. With a violent shove, he sends her crashing to the floor. He continues his tirade, declaring that commoners belong on the ground, crawling in the dirt, and should be content simply looking up at their superiors. Despite the pain and the humiliation, she looks up at him with tear-filled eyes, her voice trembling but resolute as she insists that she has every right to participate. He leans down, his face a mask of shadowed malice, and whispers that commoners don't even have the right to dream. To emphasize his point, he strikes her again, leaving her gasping on the cold floor. As she tries to recover, one of his companions steps forward and roughly pins her arms behind her back. Fangman commands his subordinate to hold her steady, ensuring she cannot escape. He then reaches for his belt, his eyes gleaming with a sadistic light as he promises to teach her a lesson she will never forget. He looms over the trembling girl, his voice dripping with malice as he tells her she is about to learn the true depth of her own foolishness. Continuing his cruel tirade, he declares his intent to sever her arm, callously remarking that the death of a commoner brat like her would go entirely unnoticed by the world. He seizes her roughly, a jagged, predatory grin stretching across his face as he dares her to scream and beg for mercy. Leaning in closer, he mockingly questions if she intends to use her status as a woman to charm her way out of the predicament. He offers a sadistic choice, suggesting that if she pledges total submission to him, he might consider sparing her limb. In response to his arrogance, she finds a spark of defiance through her tears, shouting a challenge against his twisted sense of superiority. Suddenly, a blur of motion erupts as a newcomer intervenes, his blade flashing with such speed that the aggressors are caught completely off guard. The sudden strike sends the group reeling in confusion, leaving the lackeys gasping as they struggle to comprehend the source of the attack. Having neutralized the immediate threat, the young savior stands poised, though the girl he rescued finds her legs failing her, her energy completely spent from the ordeal. He turns his gaze toward the remaining antagonist, explaining that the loss of one's fighting spirit inevitably leads to the total collapse of physical strength. He had just explained the mechanics of his victory, leaving the young girl trembling in disbelief. She could hardly process the concept of someone stealing one's very sword spirit, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion as the weight of the situation settled in. He remained a silent presence as the aggressor loomed over the girl, his heavy boots clicking against the floor as he prepared to deliver a cruel lesson. The man sneered, declaring that commoners who squandered their opportunities deserved a thorough punishment, his massive blade glinting with a cold, predatory intent. He was suddenly interrupted by a voice ringing out from the shadows, demanding to know what he thought he was doing to his friend. The challenge caught the aggressor completely off guard, forcing him to whirl around as the girl looked up in hope, sensing a sudden shift in the air. He stood there radiating an overwhelming intensity, his long hair flowing as if caught in an unseen gale. With a gaze that could pierce through steel and an aura of undeniable authority, the newcomer made it clear that the previous balance of power had just been shattered. The young swordsman arrives at the top of the stairs, his eyes widening as he finds Neko huddled on the floor. She cries out his name in relief, her voice trembling with fear as she wonders how he managed to find them in this desolate corridor. Standing between them, the antagonist with the goggles glares back, his voice dripping with venom as he commands the newcomer to stay away from the girl. He draws his blade with a sharp metallic ring, his expression twisting into a sneer as he demands to know who the boy thinks he is to be giving orders. Before a response can even be uttered, the aggressor lunges forward with such blinding speed that he seems to vanish into thin air, leaving the young knight staring at the empty space where his opponent stood only a heartbeat ago. He reappears instantly behind his target, mocking the boy's slow reactions as he prepares to strike from the shadows. The blur of movement continues as the attacker shifts his focus, but he is momentarily stunned to see that Neko has been whisked away to safety by another ally who moved with equal grace. This new protector, with long bicolor hair, holds the trembling girl close while the villain scoffs, questioning why they would place such high value on a mere commoner. He looks down at the child with a gaze of fierce protection, declaring that she is far from trash and possesses a spirit far more honest than the twisted malice driving the man before them. The insult only serves to fuel the antagonist's derision, and he lets out a sharp, mocking laugh at the mention of an honest sword, dismissing the sentiment as meaningless drivel. His face contorts into a mask of pure, unhinged aggression as he decides that he will simply end both of their lives right then and there, his eyes gleaming with a murderous intent. He sneered at the group, his voice dripping with disdain as he remarked that the fewer commoners participating in the selection battle, the better. Suddenly, the bicolor-haired warrior unleashed a devastating technique, a swordless circular slash that sent a shockwave rippling through the air. The sheer force of the impact caught his opponents off guard, leaving them reeling in confusion and disbelief. Turning his attention to the protagonist, the warrior questioned if the boy intended to just stand by while his comrades fought, noting that his current spirit was the same as when he had broken 10 swords. His eyes narrowed into a murderous glare. The word commoners hissed through his teeth like a curse. As a figure carrying a lantern approached the hallway, he realized their time was up and prepared to make a hasty exit. He clicked his tongue in annoyance, warning them that a public execution awaited them, and they should be prepared for what was to come during the selection battle. With a final, arrogant remark, he and his subordinate vanished into the shadows of the corridor. The bicolor-haired warrior watched them go, his expression hardening as he vowed that no amount of apologies would ever earn them his forgiveness. He then turned to the young girl, asking if she was all right, while she looked up at him with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. He turns to the young girl with a knowing smile, remarking that his hunches in situations like these are rarely wrong. She looks up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. Noticing her difficulty, he reaches out a hand to help her to her feet. She takes it, her movements still a bit unsteady, as she quietly confirms that she can manage. As she stands, he observes her closely, noting that her spiritual presence feels dangerously thin. It becomes clear to him that the previous encounter with their enemy has left a lingering, draining effect on her. He suggests they move out quickly, emphasizing the need to distance themselves from the area before seeking proper medical attention. The others watch on, ready to follow his lead. She murmurs an apology for the trouble she's causing, but he simply offers a reassuring look before lifting her onto his back. He carries her with ease, focused on getting her to safety. With a warm expression, he tells her that looking out for one another is simply what friends do. She leans into him, her expression softening as she accepts his kindness. Her fingers tighten their hold on his jacket, a small but firm gesture of trust and reliance in the face of her exhaustion. News of the incident reaches the academy, where Lil Icevale is struck with genuine alarm. She demands confirmation, her composure breaking at the revelation that Neko was targeted. She demands to know why she wasn't summoned, her voice sharp with indignation. The young man can only offer a weak apology, admitting he hadn't been thinking clearly in the heat of the moment. He then turns his attention to the larger problem, listening as his companion explains the weight of the name they are up against. The Fangman family isn't just any noble house. They are a lineage of knights who amassed incredible wealth through foreign trade, cementing a position of nearly untouchable influence. This influence is so vast that even the crown hesitates to act against them, a fact that leaves the young woman beside them reeling in disbelief. She hadn't realized their opponent held such a high standing in the social hierarchy. She continues, her expression darkening as she notes that if a member of that family is indeed the culprit, the situation is far more precarious than they initially feared. Because of this political shield, the swordsman realizes that reporting the incident to the academy instructors would likely be a fruitless endeavor, as the school would be loath to cross such a powerful house. The young man with the bicolor hair then provides an update on their young friend's well-being, explaining that while she suffered no physical wounds, the encounter with Wolf's Blade had a far more insidious effect. Her very fighting spirit was drained away, leaving her a hollow shell resting at home. The revelation strikes her with a wave of horror, especially as it is explained that for a warrior, that spirit is as vital as life itself. To have it stripped away so suddenly means she will be incapacitated for the foreseeable future, casting doubt on her ability to participate in the upcoming selection trials. She stares ahead, her mind racing as she calculates their dwindling options, acknowledging that their chances of making it to the matches in time are now no better than a coin flip. Beside her, the young man remains silent, his gaze fixed on the ground as his hand tightens into a white-knuckled fist. The weight of the injustice and the harm done to his friend begins to boil over. He finally speaks, his voice low and trembling with a cold, focused fury. It has been a long time since he felt a rage this profound, and the look in his eyes suggests that the Fangman family's influence will not be enough to protect them from what is coming. He clenches his fist until his knuckles turn white, the tension in his arm palpable. His gaze is fixed downward, fueled by a cold resolve to settle the score during the upcoming selection matches. Elsewhere, the sound of rhythmic footsteps echoes through a grand, sunlit corridor as a young man with striking bicolor hair approaches a set of ornate doors. Reaching his destination, he pauses by a delicate birdcage, his fingers brushing against a small key as he waits in a quiet room. The silence is broken when the swordsman enters, his voice sharp with suspicion as he demands to know why he has been summoned to such a place. His host, a high-ranking student known as the Sixth Seat, offers a calm smile while revealing that he is well aware of the swordsman's growing animosity toward a certain commoner. He continues, boasting of an information network that leaves no secret safe within the academy's walls, much to the swordsman's mounting irritation. The conversation takes a darker turn as the Sixth Seat admits that he, too, wishes to see the commoner removed, casually listing methods ranging from public disgrace to a permanent end. He then reveals the true prize, a promise from a powerful benefactor that Rebecca Lightning would be his if the commoner were eliminated, a revelation that leaves the swordsman reeling. Leaning in close to the birdcage, the man's eyes glint with a sadistic curiosity, wondering aloud what kind of desperate cries the young commoner will utter when she is finally broken. He concludes with a chilling grin, suggesting that despite their differences, he and the swordsman might actually find they have much in common, leaving the air thick with unspoken threats. He stands by the arched window, gazing out at the academy grounds as the conversation reaches its conclusion. Fankuin seeks confirmation on their newfound alliance, questioning if such cooperation is truly acceptable given their differences. With a calm, almost dismissive air, the Sixth Seat student agrees, noting that partnering with someone of his caliber is far from a poor choice and may prove mutually beneficial. His eyes narrow as they settle on the figures moving through the courtyard below, specifically the commoner girl and her companion. A cold, elitist philosophy escapes his lips as he watches them, declaring that those who do not possess noble blood are not truly human at all, but merely obstacles in the path of the worthy. The nobleman's expression twists into a dark, predatory smirk as he elaborates on his chilling worldview. He compares those beneath him to livestock, asserting that any beast foolish enough to bite the hand that feeds it must be dealt with and disposed of permanently to maintain the natural order. Leaving the nobleman behind, the young warrior finds himself back on the stone paths of the academy. He pauses, casting a final, contemplative glance back toward the high window where the unsettling pact was sealed. She approaches him, her presence a stark contrast to the darkness of the previous encounter. Noticing his distraction, she asks what is troubling him and urges him to make haste toward the training grounds, to which he offers only a brief, distracted affirmation as he tries to mask his thoughts. As he follows her, a sharp focus returns to his eyes, replacing the uncertainty. He mutters a quiet acknowledgement to himself, fully aware of the dangerous game he has entered and the necessity of the path ahead. Inside a luxurious lounge, the elite of society gathered to discuss the upcoming selection matches. A woman expressed her satisfaction at securing airship tickets, while her companion wondered aloud who would emerge victorious among the gathered prodigies, noting that the lineup was exceptionally sharp this year. She noted with a hint of disdain that even students of commoner birth were being permitted to participate in the trials this time, a significant departure from tradition. The man laughed heartily at the notion, finding the commoner's lack of self-awareness almost pitiable, though he admitted that the rumor of someone defeating the Lightning Lady made the upcoming spectacle worth watching regardless of the participant's status. High above the academy grounds, a massive airship drifted lazily through the clouds, casting a long shadow over the students assembling for the day's events. At the main entrance, guards stood watch before the towering stone walls of the arena, marking the official commencement of the selection matches under a clear sky. Among the gathered elite, Brad surveyed the small group, noting that only about 20 or 30 students had actually come forward to test their mettle. He explained to a skeptical Lil Icevale that since participation wasn't mandatory, only those with absolute confidence in their own strength had dared to show their faces. She scanned the crowd with a frown, realizing that neither Nako nor the commoner who had caused such a stir were among the ranks of the competitors, wondering if they had failed to arrive in time. Suddenly, a mocking voice cut through the air as a young man with a confident smirk approached, asking if the gathered students had already lost their nerve before the matches even began. He leaned in with a predatory grin, ignoring Brad's indignant outburst to remind the younger student that he still hadn't learned the proper respect due to his senior, despite his previous warnings. He continues his verbal assault, sneering at the young woman and labeling her a disgrace to her lineage. He mocks her status as a loser, his voice dripping with condescension as he questions if she even realizes the shame she brings to the Lightning name. Before the insults can escalate further, a refined young man interjects, stepping between them with practiced grace. He calmly identifies the aggressor as the younger brother of his own mentor, his presence immediately shifting the power dynamic in the clearing. The intruder clicks his tongue in irritation, but the newcomer remains undeterred, his gaze sharpening as he issues a cold warning. He makes it clear that while some banter is expected, he will not tolerate such excessive and public disrespect. Turning his attention away from the conflict, the nobleman offers a sincere apology for the boorish behavior she was forced to endure. He gently takes her hand, dismissing his peers' actions as those of someone who simply lacks the capacity for true understanding. He sinks to one knee in a display of exaggerated chivalry, pressing his lips to the back of her hand. With a smooth, melodic tone, He declares that a noblewoman's dignity is the most exquisite sight in existence, his flattery bordering on the obsessive. Repulsed by the unwanted intimacy, she jerks her hand back and sharply commands him to keep his distance. He merely offers a faint, knowing smile in response to her rejection, seemingly unfazed by her coldness. The surrounding students watch in stunned silence as he poses a mocking question, wondering aloud if she truly finds the company of a mere commoner more appealing than his own. His words are a calculated jab at her social standing and her associations. He briefly glances toward the ground, his expression unreadable as he mentions the protagonist by name. He claims to harbor no personal ill will toward the boy, though his tone suggests a hidden agenda. Straightening his posture, he grants her a temporary reprieve, telling her to follow her heart for the time being. His smile is polite, yet it fails to reach his eyes, which remain fixed on her with predatory focus. As he turns to depart, a dark shadow falls across his face, revealing a twisted, malevolent grin. He whispers a chilling promise to himself that this leniency is only for the moment, hinting at a much darker design for the future. He watches in silence as the other man departs, his posture remaining perfectly refined even as a mocking farewell is thrown their way. The departing noble waves a dismissive hand, calling them commoners and warning them not to run away, his arrogance lingering in the air long after he turns his back on the group. From a distance, the group remains rooted to the spot, their small figures framed by the silhouettes of those watching the encounter unfold. The tension of the confrontation begins to settle into a heavy, expectant silence. Breaking that silence, the young woman with the braided pigtails expresses her utter disgust, labeling the departed nobleman as truly beyond help. Beside her, Rebecca remains quiet, her gaze averted as she processes the unsettling encounter. The swordsman's expression hardens, his eyes narrowing into sharp slits as he stares in the direction the man went. A dark shadow seems to pass over his features, reflecting a deep-seated irritation that he struggles to contain. He finally releases a long, weary sigh, the sound carrying the weight of his mounting frustration. The sudden shift in his demeanor draws startled glances from both Rebecca and her companion, who watch him with concern. The warrior mutters under his breath about how that man never fails to be incredibly unpleasant. His jaw is set tight, his patience clearly pushed to its limit by the recent display of unearned arrogance. As the group begins to move away from the scene, the conversation shifts to the identity of the other individual who had been present. They walk through the open grounds, the immediate threat gone, but the atmosphere remaining somber and reflective. The focus turns to the young man himself, now identified as Brad Metallurg, a high-ranking student holding the 6th seat and known as a favored disciple. He maintains a stoic, almost detached expression as his credentials and reputation are acknowledged by those around him. Rebecca then reveals the true nature of the harassment, explaining that for 2 long years, the man has been relentlessly pursuing a marriage proposal. Despite her repeated and firm refusals, his obsession has not wavered in the slightest, becoming a constant shadow over her life. Hearing this, Brad observes that the man's tenacity is indeed remarkable, though his tone suggests he finds such persistence more disturbing than admirable. He looks ahead, his mind likely already weighing the implications of such a relentless and high-status pursuer. He stretched his arms wide, brimming with anticipation for the day's events. Turning to his companions, he inquired about the competition, wondering how many high-ranking students would be participating. He was surprised to learn that the top 3 seats were absent, currently serving as assistants to the Royal Knights on an external mission and wouldn't return for another month. Because of this news, he scanned the crowd, wondering who held the highest rank among those present. His companions watched his restless energy with a mix of amusement and concern as he looked for a worthy challenge. His attention was soon drawn to a solitary figure standing apart from the rest. He recognized the silhouette immediately, realizing that this individual was the one to watch in the upcoming trial. The quiet observation was interrupted by a smooth, refined voice offering a polite greeting to the group. While the newcomer maintained a composed and princely smile, the young woman beside the swordsman couldn't hide her immediate distrust, her expression souring at his arrival. A sudden, heavy metallic resonance echoed through the courtyard as the massive gates began to groan open. The sound signaled the official commencement of the proceedings, drawing every eye toward the front. As the dust settled, the instructor stood before the gathered students, her presence commanding absolute silence. She announced that she would now outline the specific rules for this year's selection match, her gaze sweeping over the eager faces. She continued her address, revealing that the nature of the trial had been decided. To the surprise of many, she declared that this term's selection would take the form of a competitive race. This announcement caused an immediate stir among the candidates, who had fully expected a test of martial prowess. The instructor explained that the contents of the trial were kept secret until the very last moment to prevent any unfair preparation, leaving the students to scramble and adjust their strategies on the fly. While the crowd buzzed with nervous energy, a few individuals remained remarkably calm, their expressions suggesting they might have used their noble influence to gain prior knowledge of the event. They watched the confusion of their peers with a sense of detached superiority. Silencing the murmurs, the instructor pointed toward the horizon, identifying the goal as the Tower of Guidance situated deep within the forest. She explained that only the first 4 to reach the destination would secure their place in the representative matches, but her final words carried a chilling weight. This was far more than a simple test of speed. She watches as a primal roar echoes across the training grounds, signaling the start of the trial. Standing before the gathered students, Her presence commands silence as the final instructions for the selection match are delivered from the high platform. The forest ahead is described as a gauntlet teeming with various monsters, a place where survival and speed must go hand in hand. With a knowing smile, she advises the candidates to be extremely careful, her calm demeanor contrasting with the visible anxiety of the students behind her. Among the crowd, the realization of the danger ahead begins to sink in, with some already predicting that many will drop out before the race even truly begins. The official continues the briefing, explaining that each participant's starting position is marked on their entry permits and urging them to move to their designated locations without delay. Noticing their separate starting points on the map, the young warrior turns to his companion with a grin, challenging her to see who can reach the tower first. He acknowledges the uncertainty of the trial, noting that while he usually wouldn't worry about her skills, the unpredictable nature of this year's match demands extra caution. His eyes burn with a fierce competitive fire as he accepts the challenge, the thrill of the hunt clearly outweighing any fear of the monsters lurking in the woods. With a final, silent vow of competition, the two allies prepare to part ways, ready to face the forest and each other in the race for the representative seats. He and the other competitors wait as the final seconds tick away. The rhythmic clicking of pocket watches echoes through the air, reflected in the determined gazes of Rebecca, the stoic Brad, and the mocking Wolf. Every second brings them closer to the trial ahead. Holding her own timepiece, the woman with the dark, wavy hair and glasses signals the end of the wait. She calmly declares that the appointed hour has arrived, her voice carrying the weight of the impending challenge. Immediately following her signal, a mechanical device on the perimeter wall triggers. With a sharp hiss and a sudden burst, a projectile is launched into the sky, serving as the unmistakable opening bell for the race. High above the dense, monster-filled forest, the signal flares bloom like white clouds against the sky. The announcement rings out across the landscape, officially declaring the commencement of the selection race as the Tower of Guidance looms in the distance. As an airship glides silently over the canopy to monitor the proceedings, the participants spring into action. Rebecca maintains her focused composure, while Wolf lets out a predatory grin, eager to begin the hunt. Far below, the race for the tower has truly begun. The vast landscape under a clear sky is dominated by a distant, slender tower and a massive airship drifting lazily above the fortified walls. Within the dense forest below, the silence is broken by the low, guttural growls of predatory wolves, their muzzles raised as they scent the air. A lone student creeps through the undergrowth, his heart hammering against his ribs. He reasons with himself that there is no need to engage every beast prowling these woods. If he can just remain undetected and slip past them, the tower is within reach. His internal logic fails him as a massive shadow falls over his trembling form. He looks up, eyes wide with terror, to find a snarling wolf looming directly behind him, its hot breath on his neck. The realization hits him with cold finality. Hiding was never an option. A piercing scream echoes across the valley, startling the birds from the trees near the distant stone tower, a grim testament to the dangers lurking in the shadows. Elsewhere in the clearing, Brad Metallurg stands amidst a pile of defeated beasts. He exhales a weary sigh, adjusting his sleeves as he remarks to himself that the numbers were far greater than he had initially anticipated. He is suddenly interrupted by a rustle in the tall grass. Before he can fully turn, a wolf bursts from the foliage, claws bared in a desperate lunge. He is greeted by a familiar, mocking voice as Wolf steps into the light, a predatory grin plastered across his face. The newcomer hails the swordsman with casual arrogance, while Brad, though surprised, acknowledges that he has been tracked down. He leans in, his expression twisting into one of pure disdain. The antagonist claims he could smell the stink of a commoner from a mile away, his finger pointed accusingly as he mocks his rival's lineage. He licks his lips with a disturbing hunger, declaring that when it comes to a feast, he is the type who prefers to devour the most delectable morsel first. He lunges forward, blade drawn, a cruel smirk playing on his lips as he taunts his opponent, calling him a commoner and demanding he be crushed quickly. He pauses for a moment, noting his opponent's impatience and comparing it unfavorably to someone named Kiwi, who apparently possesses far more restraint. Their eyes lock in a silent exchange of animosity, the tension between the two swordsmen vibrating in the air before the next move is made. Suddenly, they both react to a sharp shift in the atmosphere, their focus momentarily pulled away from their personal vendetta by an external disturbance. A powerful strike is unleashed, the force of the blow carving through the air and ground, sending a spray of dirt and debris flying as the clash truly begins. Amidst the settling dust, he offers a mock apology, suggesting that his overwhelming bloodlust caused his aim to falter slightly, as he questions why Brad is so intent on avoiding the blow. He stares back with a chillingly vacant expression, his blade still thirsty, while Brad finally recognizes the man as the same individual who had been lurking earlier. His grin returns, wider and more predatory than before, as he voices his impatience for the duel to end, while elsewhere, Fankuin feels the weight of the malice radiating through the woods. Beyond the immediate clash, the forest surrounding the central tower is marked by plumes of smoke and the sounds of distant battles, indicating that this duel is but one part of a larger chaos. From her vantage point overlooking this chaotic landscape, she watches the unfolding events with a knowing smile, her goggles reflecting the distant smoke as she remarks that the real show has finally begun. She lowered her binoculars slightly, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips as she confirmed that their arrival was perfectly timed. Though they were a bit behind schedule, she mused that the delay would serve as a fitting handicap for the one she was watching, evening the odds in the unfolding spectacle and making the show all the more interesting. With a final, chilling command, she urged the figure to unleash their full fury and run wild to their heart's content. In the shadows below, the recipient of her words responded with a dark, knowing grin, the bandage on their cheek a testament to the violence already endured and the chaos yet to come. The young swordsman moves with fluid grace, his body a blur as he navigates the grassy field. Every step is calculated, a dance of steel and shadow against the backdrop of the distant academy. Following through with his momentum, he clashes blades with the stoic Brad. The ring of metal on metal echoes through the air as they test each other's strength, neither yielding an inch in this high-stakes duel. Watching from the sidelines, the one known as Wolf clicks his tongue in irritation. He observes the exchange with a growing sense of impatience, his eyes narrowed at the display of skill before him. The protagonist focuses his energy, feeling the sword intent wrap around his arms like a second skin. The sensation is unexpected. His limbs feel denser and more resilient than he had ever imagined possible during such a manifestation. Meanwhile, the tension between the two allies boils over as Brad bluntly critiques the other's clumsy approach. He argues that such a lack of finesse creates no openings, while Wolf retorts with a snarl, insisting his brute force is doing exactly that. The air between them turns frigid as Brad offers a chilling smile, suggesting he has no qualms about the order of battle. In response, Wolf's face contorts with murderous rage, his voice a low growl as he questions if he should simply eliminate his comrade first. Their internal squabble is cut short when the protagonist interjects, his voice steady and mocking. He reminds them both that he is the one they should be focusing on, not each other's perceived failings. He is met with a roar of fury as Wolf lunges, demanding the boy stay silent and accept his inevitable defeat. The ground beneath them trembles as the antagonist unleashes a reckless, powerful strike. Amidst the sudden surge of violence, a familiar figure enters the fray, causing the swordsman to cry out in alarm. Neko's sudden presence adds a layer of chaos to the already volatile battlefield as blades collide once more. He watches in disbelief as the young girl suddenly appears on the battlefield, her face bright with a determined smile. She offers a quick apology for her tardiness, relieved that she arrived just in time to provide support. Her presence leaves the others stunned, especially the antagonist who demands to know how she recovered her strength. She explains that Arya-sensei's assistance was the key to her return, leaving her questioner even more agitated. He remains baffled, certain that he had drained her of nearly all her spiritual energy. The fact that she can stand, let alone fight, defies his understanding of the situation. Sensing his confusion, she suggests to the young swordsman that they postpone the long explanation for later. For now, their priority must be the enemies standing directly in front of them. Their resolve only serves to irritate the nobleman, who scoffs at the idea of commoners interfering with his plans. She counters his arrogance immediately, asserting that social standing has no bearing on the true strength of one's sword. Infuriated by her defiance, he lunges forward with a swift strike, but she meets his blade with surprising force. The impact of their clashing steel sends a shockwave through the air, catching him off guard. He recoils, struggling to comprehend the source of this newfound power. Nearby, the other combatants watch the exchange, noting how her timely intervention has shifted the momentum of the encounter. Seeing her hold her own, the young swordsman tells her he is counting on her to handle that side of the fray. She responds with a bright, energetic affirmation, ready to face whatever comes next. As the battle lines are redrawn, his opponent wonders aloud how the girl managed such a recovery, warning that the nobleman is far more ruthless and likely to kill her without hesitation. He merely scoffs at the warning, asking if his enemy has suddenly developed a sense of concern for his well-being. With a confident smirk, he assures his companion that everything will be fine, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. He watches with a steady gaze as the battle unfolds, noting that the girl before him is no longer the fragile soul she once was. She has found a strength that refuses to be silenced, a transformation that even her opponent cannot ignore. Because of this newfound resolve, she meets her opponent's blade with a fierce intensity, their steel clashing in a rapid exchange of strikes that echoes through the clearing. Every parry and thrust is executed with a precision she lacked only days ago. The force of the duel eventually pushes her back, leaving her breathless as she struggles to maintain her footing against the relentless pressure of the swordsman's assault. Seeing her fatigue, the swordsman clicks his tongue in irritation, frustrated that a mere commoner is forcing him to exert such effort, while she exhales a sharp breath, her eyes never wavering from his form. He begrudgingly admits that for a commoner, her movements possess a surprising sharpness, a backhanded compliment that she acknowledges with a curt, focused reply, refusing to let his arrogance break her concentration. As the pressure mounts, she is suddenly pulled back into the memory of a grueling month spent in a personal hell, where the constant fear of a blade piercing her flesh was her only companion during her training with the mentor. This memory weighs heavily on her, and she sinks to one knee, her body trembling from the phantom exhaustion of that relentless ordeal, yet her hand remains gripped tightly around her hilt. Meanwhile, the woman who orchestrated this ordeal stands within a shimmering barrier, explaining the secret of her method. Time flows differently here. Though only 3 days have passed in the outside world, 30 days of grueling, concentrated labor have transpired within these magical walls. She continues her explanation, noting that while the barrier accelerates healing and restores energy, the girl's physical and mental limits are being pushed to the absolute brink to achieve such rapid growth. Finally, the mentor declares that her primary objective is complete. The girl's internal energy has been sufficiently restored, granting her the strength required to stand and face the upcoming selection trials with a power that defies her status. She looks down at the exhausted girl, suggesting that perhaps it is time to leave the remaining tasks to their companions standing nearby. However, Neko, still catching her breath, refuses to give up, her resolve unshaken despite the physical toll. In response to the offer of rest, the young girl shouts a desperate plea for the training to continue. Sweat beads on her forehead, and her eyes burn with a fierce intensity as she begs for the chance to push herself even further. Seeing this fire in her student's eyes, the mentor draws her blade with a calm, practiced grace. She acknowledges the girl's resolve and declares that the special lesson will now truly begin, the air between them suddenly heavy with the weight of impending combat. As the session commences, she finds herself locked in a fierce exchange with the young swordsman. Every strike and parry is a test of her newfound speed, and as she watches his movements, she can't help but compare the weight of his blade to the overwhelming power she faced before. Their blades clash in a blur of motion, the sound of steel ringing through the training grounds. She moves with a fluidity that was absent just days ago, her body reacting instinctively to the rhythm of the duel. Suddenly, a strange sensation washes over her as the world seems to slow down. To her shock, the once blinding speed of her opponent's strike now appears almost stationary, allowing her to see every opening with crystalline clarity. The princely youth stares down at the shattered remains of his blade, his voice trembling with a cold, simmering fury as he curses the one responsible for such an insult to his dignity. Standing opposite him, the young swordsman keeps his weapon leveled, calmly pointing out that even a high-ranking noble is powerless without a blade and urging his opponent to concede the match. He remains silent for a moment, his head bowed in shadow, before a dark, mocking chuckle escapes his lips at the mere suggestion of surrender. Suddenly, he erupts in a fit of manic rage, screaming that a person of his stature would never bow to a commoner as a strange, violent energy begins to coalesce around his right arm, shattering the air itself. With a heavy metallic clang, a massive, ornate gauntlet, the Titan's fist, materializes over his hand, and he spits out that it is a humiliation to even reveal this secret weapon against someone so lowly. He lunges forward with a burst of speed that defies his refined appearance, the heavy gauntlet cutting through the air like a falling star. The swordsman's eyes widen in shock at the sheer velocity of the assault, barely bringing his own blade up in a desperate attempt to parry the incoming blow. The impact is cataclysmic, sending a shockwave through the clearing that tosses the defender back like a leaf in a gale, while the noble boasts that his strength now surpasses that of giants, mocking the futility of any defense. He stares down at his struggling opponent, the massive metal fingers of his gauntlet inches away from crushing the boy's defense. With a twisted, wide-eyed grin, he begins a relentless barrage of strikes, mockingly wondering how much longer the commoner's body can possibly withstand the crushing pressure. He laughs, mocking the desperate defense of his opponent, claiming such a pathetic display is fitting for a commoner who dared to challenge him. With a roar, he unleashes the full might of the Titan's fist, the massive gauntlet glowing with destructive intent as he brings it down for a crushing blow. The impact is thunderous, yet the expected destruction is met with a sudden, sharp resistance as a figure intercedes to halt the massive weapon. He recoils in disbelief, his eyes wide as he realizes his most powerful strike has been completely neutralized by someone he considered insignificant. Standing firm, Neko levels her blade horizontally, her expression cold and determined as she declares that the momentum of the battle has shifted. She draws strength from the trust placed in her by Phi, feeling an unprecedented surge of power and clarity as she prepares to strike back. The noble stammers, sensing a terrifying change in the air as a strange, overwhelming aura begins to radiate from the young girl standing before him. With a sharp command to illuminate the darkness, she prepares her final move, her sword beginning to glow with a brilliant, celestial light. In a blur of motion, she executes a perfect crescent strike, the crescent moon of heaven, carving through the air with lethal grace and immense power. He watches in sheer horror, his mind unable to comprehend how a mere commoner could master the legendary and complex art of the quick draw. He refuses to accept the reality of the situation, his voice cracking as he bellows his denial. Across from him, the young girl remains perfectly still, her hand gripped tight on the hilt of her blade. He watches, his eyes widening in a moment of pure, unadulterated realization, as the world seems to slow down and the distance between them vanishes in a blur of motion. The strike, a technique known as the moonlight flash, erupts in a brilliant arc of light that carves through the air, a single, decisive moment that silences the forest. She completes the fluid motion, her blade a shimmering crescent that seems to hold the very essence of the moon, leaving a trail of light lingering in her wake. In the aftermath, the noble stumbles, his massive gauntlet sparking and heavy as lead as he gasps in confusion, realizing that despite the lack of a physical wound, his body refuses to obey. Looking back at him with a calm, steady gaze, she explains that her blade did not strike his flesh, but rather severed his very consciousness, a testament to a skill that cuts only what the wielder intends. With the conflict settled, she calmly returns her sword to its scabbard, the metallic click punctuating her final words as she declares her victory for the day, leaving the defeated noble slumped on the ground behind her. The arrogant noble stands tall, a predatory grin stretching across his face as he prepares to settle the score. Opposite him, the white-haired commoner remains stoic, his eyes fixed on his opponent with unwavering focus. He lunges forward with a snarl, his movements fueled by a deep-seated resentment for the boy's perceived insolence. He bellows that he cannot stand that attitude, disgusted that a mere peasant would dare to carry himself as an equal. As he swings his blade, he invokes an old adage, claiming that those who are not of noble blood are hardly human at all. His voice is thick with a sense of inherited superiority. The assault continues as he compares commoners to mere livestock, insisting that it is against the natural order for such creatures to defy their masters. Every strike is punctuated by his venomous words. In the face of this verbal and physical onslaught, the young swordsman remains remarkably composed, dismissing the noble's obsession with status as nothing more than worthless pride. He points out the sheer folly of throwing away an opportunity to grow stronger simply to protect such a fragile ego. His words seem to strike with physical force, staggering his opponent who recoils with a sharp intake of breath, his composure beginning to fracture. With a piercing gaze, the commoner asserts that talent is not a birthright, noting that the world is full of exceptional individuals who rose from nothing. This assertion is met with a roar of denial as the noble screams for him to be silent, refusing to entertain the idea that they could have both reached greater heights by acknowledging one another's strength. Ignoring those frantic cries, the white-haired youth disarms his foe with a swift, decisive motion, sending the blade spinning through the air. He stands his ground, calmly telling the stunned aristocrat to retrieve his weapon, promising to wait for the duel to resume. Watching him with a cold, analytical gaze, the commoner notes that by abandoning his true form and fighting with such desperation, his foe has effectively chosen his own demise. As the man reaches for his sword with trembling hands, he is warned that this path will lead only to regret. He lashes out with a blindingly fast strike that cuts through the air with violent precision. Despite the speed of the attack, the commoner remains unimpressed, prompting the noble to boast that he hasn't even begun to show the true extent of his power. In response to the perceived insult, the noble bellows a command to hunt, his face contorted with a mix of aristocratic rage and sadistic anticipation. From the swirling energy and heavy, clanking chains, a pack of spectral sword wolves manifests, their ethereal forms radiating a predatory hunger as they prepare to swarm. He watches with a wide, jagged grin as the commoner's eyes widen in realization, the sheer scale of the summoned sword wolf army beginning to weigh heavily on the battlefield. The noble continues his verbal assault, expressing his growing irritation and promising that the commoner's defiance ends here as the spectral beasts close in from all sides. Refusing to be cornered, the commoner executes a swift, dual-strike technique, his movements becoming a blur of motion as he carves through the spectral beasts with a bladeless slash. As the wolves dissipate into mist, he pauses, noting the strange lack of physical resistance, and wondering if these creatures are merely masses of condensed energy rather than physical threats. A dark shadow falls over the noble's face as he lets out a chilling laugh, warning the commoner that he has made a fatal mistake by making physical contact with those entities. The realization hits the commoner like a physical blow as the energy surrounding the wolves vanishes. He finally understands that these were the very things that drained Neko's strength. He is met with a cruel smirk from the noble, who notes that the swordsman has finally grasped the dire nature of the situation. Because of this realization, the aristocrat explains the true horror of his summons. These spectral beasts feast upon the very sword spirit of their enemies, growing more formidable with every strike they absorb. He continues to taunt the warrior, questioning how much longer he can possibly withstand the onslaught as the wolves lunge with renewed ferocity. He watches as his target is forced to leap and weave through the air, narrowly avoiding the ethereal fangs, though the warrior admits to himself that these creatures are becoming a significant nuisance. He is mocked by the noble, whose voice rings out boasting that because the wolves lack physical bodies, their speed transcends human limits, making it impossible for a mere commoner to keep pace. With a dramatic flourish, the summoner prepares to deliver the finishing blow, declaring that the struggle reaches its conclusion here and now. He commands his pack to drain every last drop of energy, his face contorted in a mask of sadistic glee as he demands they feast until their prey's life is utterly extinguished. He is interrupted as a strange light suddenly flares, reflecting in a wide, focused eye as a hidden power begins to stir within the exhausted swordsman. The swordsman stands still, his head bowed as he quietly questions if this is truly the limit of the noble's power, a remark that leaves his adversary momentarily stunned. He surges forward with unexpected strength before the noble can react, his gaze sharpening with a terrifying intensity as he dismisses his opponent's arrogance, proving the battle is far from over. The confrontation intensifies as the noble's spectral wolves begin to snarl and thrash, seemingly out of his control. Fit watches with a sharp, calculating gaze, noting the shift in the beast's behavior. Seeing the confusion, the noble explains that these creatures thrive on sword spirit, growing more powerful the more they consume. He maintains that despite their wild appearance, he remains their absolute master. He is met with a cold challenge from Fit, who suggests that if the noble truly cannot handle the beasts, he should simply feed them more of his own spirit until they are satiated. This suggestion sends the noble into a fit of rage, as he screams that his own spirit is so overwhelming it cannot be suppressed. He is baffled that Fit is even still standing, let alone speaking, under the weight of such pressure. Standing firm amidst the growling wolves, the young commoner calmly remarks that this was exactly why he had asked his earlier question. He then releases his own latent power, a terrifying surge of energy that causes his hair to flare upward like white flames. With a chilling calm, he asks if the noble's display was truly the best he could manage. The sheer force of the eruption sends shockwaves through the area, leaving Neko and Rebecca breathless as they struggle to comprehend the source of this sudden, overwhelming pressure. Even the noble is forced back, his face pale with disbelief as he realizes he cannot even approach the center of the storm. He stares in horror at the sheer scale of the power being unleashed. Within the eye of the spiritual hurricane, Fit stands unmoved, his presence so dense that the noble begins to question if such a vast amount of spirit could possibly belong to a single human being. He is driven to desperation by the terrifying display, frantically commanding his wolves to lunge forward and strike down the monster before them. He reels back as a blinding pillar of light erupts from the commoner, the sheer force of the released sword spirit scouring the landscape and pushing back everything in its path. Because of this sudden surge, his connection to his own power falters. The noble stares in wide-eyed horror as he realizes his sword spirit has been completely severed, leaving him vulnerable. While he struggles to process the shock of his depleted energy, Brad lets out a desperate cry, charging forward even as the protagonist remains unervingly calm amidst the fading light. The warrior moves with predatory grace, a single, swift strike, sending the noble's blade spinning uselessly into the air. Having disarmed his opponent with effortless precision, he looms over the fallen aristocrat, the silence between them heavy with the weight of shattered pride. As he maintains his silent vigil, the noble begins to spiral into a frantic internal monologue, unable to comprehend how a mere commoner could possess such overwhelming strength, while Brad watches from the sidelines, paralyzed by the impossibility of the scene. Ignoring the man's panic, he looks down at the trembling noble and calmly instructs him to retrieve his weapon, promising to wait for him to regain his composure and fight again. The fallen man can only gaze up in a mixture of fear and confusion, his mind failing to grasp the mercy or the absolute confidence being shown to him by someone he considered beneath him. Turning his attention toward Brad, who is visibly shaken, he asks the man what it is he truly desires from this conflict, his voice steady and devoid of malice. In response, the desperate man breaks into a jagged, manic laugh, frantically offering gold, status, or any reward imaginable if only he is allowed to emerge victorious from this encounter, his dignity completely abandoned. He cowers on the grass, his desperate pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. Fit stands over him, his voice cold as he reminds the fallen noble of the cowardly methods used to hurt Neko. Looking down with eyes devoid of pity, the young man reiterates his earlier warning, making it clear that no amount of tears or apologies will earn forgiveness for the pain inflicted. He brings his hands together, focusing his remaining strength for a final, decisive blow. He promises to show his opponent a sight worth taking to the afterlife, the very moment the heavens are torn asunder. Ignoring the noble's screams for mercy and his desperate pleas to stop, he grits his teeth against the strain of the technique, his expression one of grim determination as the power reaches its peak. With a sudden, violent motion, he unleashes the strike, a heavenly rift that carves through the air with overwhelming force. This swordless slash erupts, a manifestation of pure will that sends the defeated man tumbling backward through the dirt. He lies gasping and defeated on the forest floor as the dust settles, with Fit standing over his broken form, the intensity having vanished from the victor's gaze. The victor surveys the quiet woods and lets out a soft breath, the weight of the moment lifting as he mutters that he was only joking about the lethal intent. The grand, vaulted ceilings of the royal hall echo with the silence of an impending confrontation as a lone figure stands amidst the vast marble floor. He narrows his eyes, his gaze darting between the armored figures closing in on him, demanding to know who they think they are to obstruct his path. The circle of steel tightens around him, the guard's silence more deafening than any shout as they trap him in the center of the hall. One of the knights steps forward, unfurling an official document and declaring that a warrant has been issued for the arrest of Clifford Lightning. He speaks with the weight of the law, his voice echoing through the hall as he makes the charges public. He recoils in disbelief, his face flushing with indignation as he bellows that this must be some sick joke, demanding to see what possible evidence could exist against a royal knight. He refuses to accept the reality of the situation, his voice cracking with desperate rage. The knight remains unmoved, explaining that the very assassins Clifford hired to eliminate students at the First Academy have already confessed everything. He adds a final, stinging blow, mentioning that Clifford will soon be reunited with his brother in the same prison cell. His composure shatters completely, and he begins to stammer, pathetically arguing that such schemes are merely the way of the noble world and questioning why this is happening now. His arrogance has been replaced by a frantic, cornered desperation. The knight's voice turns cold as he reveals that the king has entrusted the future of the entire kingdom to the young man Clifford tried to kill, making his crime an act of ultimate treason. The realization of his failure and the status of his target hits him like a physical blow. He is forced to his knees, his screams of lies and mistake falling on deaf ears as he is told he will never again be permitted to set foot on the soil of this nation. The guards restrain him firmly, ignoring his frantic struggles. His world crumbles into a singular, guttural roar of despair, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated agony as the weight of his ruin finally takes hold. He is gone, dragged away to face justice, leaving the young heroes alone in the quiet of the woods. Neko's voice breaks the silence as she calls out to Fit, her relief evident as she catches up to him. Nearby, the defeated Brad lies motionless on the forest floor, his strength spent. Rebecca joins them, noting their victory with a satisfied air, while Fit offers a humble apology, feeling as though he had robbed her of the chance to settle her own score. She responds with a bright, genuine smile, explaining that her desire for strength was never fueled by a simple need for vengeance. Hearing this, a weight seems to lift from his shoulders, and he offers a small, knowing smile in return. Their moment of respite is shattered by a sudden, thunderous crash echoing through the trees. Shadows loom as monstrous forms emerge from the foliage, prompting him to shout a command to charge as they prepare to fight their way through. Rebecca is the first to strike, her massive hammer whistling through the air before connecting with a bone-shattering impact. The force of her swing sends several of the creatures flying, clearing a path through the initial wave of the ambush. As she shatters the front line, he follows her lead, his blade crackling with intense electrical energy as he invokes the second stage of his Thunderdrum technique. With a blinding flash, he carves through the nearest beast, the air humming with the power of his strike. While he finishes his strike, she stands tall, her heavy weapon resting momentarily as she surveys the clearing. The ground is littered with the remains of their foes, but the immediate threat has only just begun to subside. Elsewhere, a young woman with sharp features and a cold gaze watches the unfolding chaos with a predatory grin. She muses to herself that her luck is holding strong today, her confidence radiating as she prepares to make her own move. Pushing forward with renewed intensity, the duo charges toward the distant tower that looms over the tree line. He declares that they will force their way through any obstacle, their eyes fixed on the objective ahead. While they press their advantage, two other figures observe the progress of the students from a high, pristine hall. One, a woman with twin tails, notes with a hint of surprise that someone has managed to get ahead of them, while her companion wonders aloud what has become of the first years. She watches with a cold, calculating gaze, her mind fixed on the competition. To her, every student is a rival to be surpassed, regardless of their year or status, and she harbors no intention of showing humility or restraint in the trials ahead. Meanwhile, the commoner and his companion finally reach their destination, their arrival marked by a boisterous exclamation of success. He scans the grand interior with wide-eyed wonder, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten as he takes in the scale of the hall. Beside him, the dark-haired warrior lets out a weary but satisfied sigh, remarking on how the journey proved far more taxing and distant than she had initially anticipated. Their arrival does not go unnoticed, as a familiar voice rings out across the stone floor. The silver-haired girl spots them and calls out his name in a mix of relief and surprise. Recognizing her friend, the hammer wielder waves back enthusiastically, the tension of their trek through the forest finally beginning to dissipate. The young woman is weeping with relief, her voice trembling as she explains that Arya-sensei managed to heal her injuries. Her companions stand by her side, their expressions a mix of concern and quiet support as they process the weight of the ordeal they just survived. He suddenly appears, his posture radiating an insufferable confidence as he boasts about being the first to complete the trial. With a mocking grin, he remarks on how slow the others were, clearly relishing his perceived superiority over the group. She, however, is far more interested in the mechanics of the battle, leaning in close to the swordsman with an intense, almost predatory curiosity. She demands to know how he managed to fight the wolf without sustaining a single injury and presses him for details on the specific sword-drawing technique he employed. She continues to crowd his personal space, her questions coming in a relentless barrage that leaves him visibly irritated. He tries to maintain his distance, finding her sudden and aggressive interest in his skills to be nothing more than a nuisance as they walk. They eventually move into the grand hall, the vastness of the chamber emphasizing the gravity of the moment as the young woman finally begins to steady her breathing. The tension of the combat has faded, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence that fills the ornate corridor. He, a high-ranking official, steps forward to address the gathered group, his voice echoing through the hall as he notes that everyone has finally arrived. His presence commands immediate attention, signaling the transition from the chaos of the trials to the formality of the results. She listens intently as the official declares the selection match is officially over, her sharp eyes narrowing as the weight of the announcement sinks in. The period of testing has concluded, and the time for judgment has arrived for all participants. They are then presented as the chosen few: Fit, Nako, Rebecca Lightning, and Lil Iceberg. Each face reflects a different reaction to the news, ranging from stoic determination to a quiet, internal processing of their victory. They stand together before the assembly, a disparate group of warriors now bound by a common purpose as they are officially recognized as the representative members. The weight of their new responsibility hangs in the air, marking the beginning of a much larger journey for the four of them. It stands as a silent witness to the day's events, the towering spires of the academy reaching toward the sky as the sun begins to set on this chapter of their lives. The trials are over, but the true challenge is only just beginning within those stone walls. A sharp snap of the fingers signals the start of a new briefing, drawing the attention of the gathered students. Arya-sensei stands before the newly selected representatives, her expression calm as she begins to outline the upcoming inter-school battle, explaining that their journey as representatives has only just begun. When the young swordsman raises his hand to inquire about the numerical designations of the schools, she explains that the royal capital houses four distinct academies, ranging from the first to the fourth. She elaborates on the hierarchy, noting that the first academy maintains the highest standards of entry and prestige, with the difficulty and status of the other institutions decreasing as the numbers go down. The weight of their position becomes clear as she mentions that the first academy has historically dominated these competitions, securing victory every single year without fail. Her tone sharpens, making it explicitly clear that for those standing in this room, failure is simply not an option. The reputation of the First Academy rests on their shoulders. Seeking further clarification, the girl with the twin tails asks about the specific structure and content of this year's matches, wanting to know what challenges they will face. The instructor describes a traditional team format where the first side to claim 2 victories wins, though the presence of 4 representatives instead of the usual 3 prompts a question from the dark-haired girl regarding their numbers. She holds up 2 fingers, explaining that the opening match will deviate from tradition by being a 2-on-2 tag team encounter, requiring a different level of coordination. This revelation brings a sense of understanding to the group, and the prospect of a coordinated tag battle brings a spark of genuine anticipation to the young man's eyes as he considers the possibilities. He and his companions listen intently as their instructor delivers a final warning. With only 2 weeks remaining until the main event, she urges the 4 representatives to maintain their rigorous training. The weight of the upcoming challenge is etched onto their faces, each one steeling themselves for the trials ahead. Far from the halls of the First Academy, another fortress looms against the horizon, its spires reaching toward a clear sky. This distant seat of power hums with its own preparations, oblivious to the specific struggles of the representatives, but deeply invested in the coming conflict. Within these different walls, a sharp click of a heel echoes against the stone floor as students spar in the courtyard. Whispers have begun to circulate among the ranks, with one student questioning another about the latest rumors regarding the prestigious First Academy. In the shadows of a grand archway, the gossip takes a more pointed turn. Figures obscured by the light discuss the shocking news that the top-ranked school has chosen to field not 1, but 2 commoners for the inter-school battle, a move seen by many as a sign of desperation or decline. A woman listening to the chatter can't help but offer a cold, dismissive smirk. To her, the inclusion of commoners in such a high-stakes tournament is a clear indication that the First Academy's long reign of dominance is finally coming to an end. Suddenly, the air is split by a thunderous impact as a fist shatters a training target into splinters. The sheer force of the blow reflects a simmering rage, a physical manifestation of the indignation felt by those who believe they were overlooked in favor of the lowborn. She stands amidst the debris, her face twisted into a predatory grin as she contemplates the insult of being passed over for commoners. Rather than being discouraged, the warrior finds a dark amusement in the situation, her eyes gleaming with the anticipation of crushing those deemed her superiors. The city of Central is alive with festive energy, banners fluttering in the breeze above the cobblestone streets and towering spires. Amidst the crowd, vendors hawk their wares, the scent of fresh bread and street food filling the air as the group makes their way through the bustling market. He can hardly contain his excitement, his eyes wide and a boisterous shout escaping him as he takes in the overwhelming sights and sounds of the capital. Their guide gestures toward the horizon where the massive Central Coliseum looms, its stone walls a testament to the grand spectacles held within. Despite the grandeur, he finds himself distracted by the savory aroma of grilled skewers, prompting a sharp reprimand and a firm grip on his collar to keep him from wandering off toward the food stalls. Even the small creature accompanying them seems startled by the sudden tension as he is dragged back, complaining about being stopped from pursuing the delicious scent. The instructor reminds them all that the opening ceremony for the inter-school battle is about to begin, leaving no time for idle distractions or snacks as the weight of the upcoming competition settles over them. Inside the Coliseum, the vast arena floor sits ready, a checkered pattern of stone waiting for the feet of the competitors who will soon fill the stands. Tension mounts among the various participants. While some remain composed, others, like the fierce girl with the twin buns, radiate a volatile energy, eager for the combat to start. Guards stand watch at the ornate entrance to the staging area, where banners hang in silent anticipation of the warriors about to emerge. The official stood before the assembly, his voice steady as he announced that the match cards were finally being made public. Immediately following his words, the tournament bracket flickered into view, detailing the path each team would have to take toward victory. She stared at the display, her brow furrowing with anxiety as she realized their first opponent would be the formidable Third Academy. Her concern was met with a boisterous laugh from their energetic teammate, who questioned if the opposition was truly that strong, while others noted that even those with the talent for the First Academy sometimes chose other schools for various reasons. While she continued her boastful display, the clink of porcelain drew attention to the corner of the room where tea was being served, and the instructor explained that many students are scouted with promises of special treatment or significant financial rewards. She watched the group intently, the weight of the upcoming battles settling in, though the volatile girl's infectious enthusiasm seemed to baffle her more reserved teammates. The doors suddenly swung open, and they marched in with sneers on their faces, loudly mocking the presence of a commoner within the prestigious First Academy's ranks. He leaned in with a predatory grin, claiming they had merely come to offer a proper greeting to the fallen elites of the First Academy. They continued their verbal assault, laughing at the fact that half of the Academy's representative slots had been stolen by commoners, a clear sign of the school's decline. He then turned his venom specifically toward her, bringing up the disgrace of the Lightning family and her brother's recent arrest, causing her to tremble with suppressed fury. She is surrounded by her friends, who refuse to let the insults stand. Neko urges her to ignore the cruel words, while Fit declares with absolute certainty that they will win the tournament, providing a shield of solidarity against the nobles' malice. Seeing the group's resolve, the arrogant nobles decide they have had enough for now. One of them mutters about how interesting the situation has become as they turn to leave the room, their smug confidence slightly shaken by the display of unity. Their exit is hastened by a sharp, cold voice cutting through the air. A fierce young woman with her hair in large buns looms over them, her eyes burning with irritation as she tells them they've been noisy for far too long and should vanish immediately. Terrified by her intense aura, the nobles scramble away without another word. As the tension shifts, the group recognizes the newcomer as Elzina Kandras. She is a legendary figure who was ranked second among all first years at the prestigious First Academy before transferring, a feat that marks her as a genius among geniuses. She looks down at Fit, noting his status as a first year and acknowledging that he seems to know of her formidable reputation. She casually brings up rumors of a student expelled for assaulting an upperclassman, though she quickly dismisses the topic as trivial. Her presence is overwhelming, leaving Neko and the others visibly shaken by her bluntness and the casual way she discusses such serious matters. With her brief introduction complete, she turns to depart, claiming she only stopped by to offer a formal greeting. She walks away with a relaxed, confident stride that belies the immense power she seems to hold back. Before anyone can react, she vanishes. The sheer speed of her movement leaves the group stunned, unable to comprehend how she could disappear from their sight in a single heartbeat, leaving only a lingering sense of dread in her wake. Elzina leans in with a predatory grin, her eyes sharp with disdain as she confronts the group. She mocks the presence of a commoner among them, remarking that the First Academy must have truly gone soft to allow such a thing within its ranks. He stands his ground despite her intimidation, introducing himself as Fit with a steady, unwavering voice. Elzina barely acknowledges the gesture, her expression remaining one of cold amusement as she repeats his name with a mocking edge, as if the very sound of it is beneath her. Turning her back on the group, she makes it clear that she has no intention of being friendly or forming any sort of bond. She issues a sharp challenge, telling them to prove they are worth her time by at least making it to the finals before expecting any further interaction. Her parting words are a promise of total destruction, delivered with a look of pure, unadulterated malice. As she stalks away, the group is left in her wake, visibly unsettled by the sheer weight of her hostility and the intensity of her gaze. They watch her depart, the air still thick with the tension she left behind. Rebecca observes that Elzina's attitude went beyond simple arrogance. It felt like a deep-seated, personal resentment, leaving them to wonder what could have fueled such vitriol. Realizing they cannot linger on the encounter, the group moves through the stone corridors of the academy. They remind themselves that they need to regroup with Lil and the rest of their team quickly to prepare for the challenges that await them in the arena. Inside a quiet waiting room, the atmosphere shifts as the reality of the tournament sets in. A voice breaks the silence, noting that the time for their scheduled match is rapidly approaching, signaling that their moment of truth is at hand. The young swordsman finds his resolve again, pumping his fist with a wide, determined grin that masks any lingering doubt. He rallies his companions with a shout, declaring that it is finally time for them to take the stage and show the academy what they are truly capable of. However, his sudden burst of bravado quickly evaporates into a state of comical despair. He slumps over, his energy completely drained as he contemplates the heavy burden that has just been placed upon his shoulders. His companions try to explain the situation, noting that the roster has already been submitted and cannot be changed. Neko will serve as the vanguard and Lil as the center, leaving him with the daunting responsibility of acting as the team's general, a role he clearly feels wholly unprepared for. He stands amidst his teammates, looking overwhelmed by the sudden weight of his role. Rebecca is in tears, lamenting her loss in a game of rock-paper-scissors that relegated her to a later position, while Neko tries to offer him some encouragement, though the possibility of the match reaching the general's turn clearly weighs on him. Seeing his hesitation, Elzina steps forward with a sharp, confident smirk, dismissing the idea that he will even need to step onto the field. She declares that they will secure 2 consecutive victories, leaving no room for him to participate, before calling Neko to join her as they prepare to head out. The two of them walk out into the vast, sun-drenched arena, where the crowd's roar is muffled by the gravity of the moment. The scoreboard clearly displays the matchup, the Third Academy's vanguard against the First Academy's, marking the official start of the tournament's opening bout. Across the divide, their opponents from the First Academy sneer with unearned superiority, their expressions dripping with disdain. They mock the inclusion of a commoner in the lineup, suggesting that surrendering now would be far less embarrassing than the inevitable defeat that awaits them. Ignoring the insults, the combatants take their positions as an official steps between them to oversee the proceedings. The air grows thick with anticipation as he prepares to reiterate the strict regulations governing the duel. He speaks with a clear, booming voice, outlining that victory is achieved only through an opponent's surrender or their total incapacitation. He adds a stern warning. Any further aggression after a match is decided, or the act of killing an opponent, will result in the immediate disqualification of the entire school. With the rules established, the official raises his hand, looking between the 2 pairs of fighters to confirm their readiness. Elzina and Neko stand firm, their gazes locked onto the arrogant nobles who continue to look down upon them. A heavy silence falls over the stadium as the 4 warriors focus entirely on one another. Every muscle is tensed, and every breath is measured, the world narrowing down to the space between them and the first move that will break the stillness. The signal to begin echoes through the air, and the arena erupts into motion as the combatants charge forward. One of the First Academy students lunges with a shout, confident that the first strike will decide the entire engagement. In response to the boastful cry, Elzina swings her massive weapon with a ferocious snarl, telling her opponent to be silent. Beside her, Neko moves with practiced grace, the two of them launching a coordinated counteroffensive as the battle truly begins. She charges forward with a fierce intensity, her voice straining as she reminds her partner of the grueling 2 weeks of training they endured to reach this moment. Beside her, the silver-haired girl responds with a bright, determined smile, vowing that their efforts will not be in vain and that they will not be stopped here. The official brings the clash to a halt, his arm thrust high into the air as he declares the First Academy the victors of the opening bout. The stadium erupts in cheers as the two young women share a jubilant high-five, their faces glowing with the satisfaction of a hard-earned triumph. He watches the celebration from the balcony with a lazy, self-assured grin, leaning against the railing as if the outcome were never in doubt. He remarks to his companions that at this rate, there is absolutely nothing for them to worry about, while the small, white creature beside him looks on with quiet curiosity. He then turns his gaze toward the stoic girl with the twin tails, his expression shifting to one of playful arrogance as he admits he would hate to have to lose on purpose if the match actually reached his turn. She doesn't even look at him, her eyes fixed forward as she tells him to just watch, asserting that she has no intention of letting the opposition push them that far. She steps out onto the stone floor of the arena moments later, her posture rigid and her gaze cold as she faces her next opponent. Across from her, the man in the heavy cloak stands ready, his expression grim and focused as the referee takes his position between them to signal the start of the next decisive encounter. The arena is set for the next bout. Lil Iceberg stands poised, her gaze fixed on her opponent across the tiled floor as the official stands ready to signal the start of the match. Watching from the sidelines, her companions note that this is their first time seeing her fight, agreeing that the match will likely be over in an instant. As the signal to begin echoes through the hall, her opponent braces himself, hoping to somehow withstand the initial assault. Without hesitation, she strikes. A massive wave of jagged ice erupts from the ground, surging forward with terrifying speed in a preemptive strike designed to end the confrontation immediately. The sheer scale of the magic leaves the onlookers breathless as they marvel at her ability to manifest such a colossal amount of ice without even drawing her blade. Her opponent, caught completely off guard, can only stare in disbelief as the freezing wave consumes him, leaving him shivering and defeated. As the frost settles, she stands calmly in the center of the devastation, the power she wields clearly far greater than it was during their previous encounters. Her opponent remains frozen in place, his face a mask of shock and cold, the battle having been decided in a single heartbeat. She approaches the encased man, her sword held at her side, and with a cold, detached expression, she asks if he is ready to concede. He manages to stammer out his surrender through chattering teeth, prompting the official to immediately raise his hand and declare Lil Iceberg the victor of the match. Returning to her team, she is met with enthusiastic praise for her easy win, with her allies noting that at this rate, the championship is within their grasp. Despite the celebration, she remains focused, knowing the challenges ahead will only grow more difficult as they advance to the finals. Nearby, the warrior watches the proceedings with a sharp, expectant grin, sitting with her legs crossed as her eyes gleam with the anticipation of her own upcoming battle. She watches with a predatory grin, her excitement for the coming violence palpable as she stands beside her teammate. Lil warns her to watch closely, noting that they should see what these newcomers are capable of. Below them, the grand arena echoes with the announcer's voice, declaring the commencement of the match between the 2nd and 4th Academies. The vanguards are summoned to the center of the tiled floor, their shadows stretching long under the bright sun. Stepping forward for the 2nd Academy are two identical blonde youths, their expressions brimming with a shared, smug confidence. Facing them from the 4th Academy are a stern-faced man and a woman, both gripping their weapons with visible tension. These newcomers, identified as Hildian and Sieg, radiate an aura of effortless superiority. Their matching uniforms and identical features suggest a level of coordination that few teams can hope to match. Observing from the stands, Lil points out the tactical difficulty of facing twins, suggesting they could be formidable obstacles in the rounds to come. As she speaks, the official's voice rings out, signaling the start of the duel. Sieg leans in, whispering a casual command to his brother to take the lead and enjoy himself. Hildian responds with a low, disinterested grunt, his eyes already narrowing as he focuses on his prey. He lunges forward in a blur of motion that defies the eye, his speed so great that the 4th Academy warrior can only gasp in shock as the ground erupts in a cloud of dust. The sheer force of the movement leaves the defenders reeling before they can even raise their blades. The warrior appears behind his target before the dust can even settle, pressing the cold steel of a blade against the nape of her neck. Hildian has moved with impossible swiftness, his voice a chilling whisper as he commands her to remain perfectly still. He holds the sword steady, his gaze devoid of mercy as he warns her that any sudden movement will only result in unnecessary pain. The woman is frozen, her breath hitching as she realizes the massive gulf in power between them. Meanwhile, Sieg stands back, blocking any attempt at rescue with a casual, mocking warning. He insists that no one should dare interrupt his brother's entertainment, leaving their opponents utterly helpless in the face of such overwhelming speed and cruelty. He lets out a piercing, manic laugh that echoes across the arena, his blade a blur as he relentlessly batters his opponent. The 4th Academy student can do little more than cower behind a failing guard, gritting his teeth against the overwhelming force of the assault. From the sidelines, the observers watch with growing unease, noting that despite his absolute advantage, the swordsman refuses to deliver a finishing blow. It has ceased to be a sanctioned duel between knights and has devolved into a cruel display of toy-like torment. The battered student attempts a desperate counter, but his movements are sluggish and predictable. With a mocking smirk, the golden-haired twin easily sidesteps the effort, treating the life-or-death struggle as nothing more than a trivial game. He suddenly lunges forward, his hand clamping firmly over the boy's face to stifle his cries. Staring into his victim's eyes with a wide, unsettling gaze, he whispers that it is far too early for the entertainment to conclude. Watching the brutality unfold, the young women in the stands can only look on in silent horror, realizing that the officials will not intervene. According to the rigid rules of the tournament, the match continues until a formal surrender is voiced or a combatant is physically incapable of standing. Looming over his prey, the aggressor continues his psychological assault, ensuring the boy understands that this nightmare will not end simply because he wishes it so. A sickening thud resonates through the air as another heavy strike connects, drawing gasps of disbelief from the crowd. The sheer disparity in power is undeniable, yet the violence shows no sign of abating. His face contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated glee as he roars that the pain he has inflicted is nowhere near enough to satisfy him. The thrill of the hunt has completely consumed his reason. Nearby, his twin brother watches the spectacle with a look of detached boredom, leaning casually against his own weapon. He calls out a half-hearted warning, suggesting that perhaps his brother should show at least a modicum of restraint before things go too far. Ignoring the advice, the sadistic youth turns his predatory focus toward the remaining female opponent, pinning her with a terrifyingly close proximity. He mocks her fear, calling her cute, with a twisted smile, and even has the audacity to suggest a date while she trembles under the weight of his malice. He looms over his fallen prey with a wide, manic stare, noting with cold satisfaction that only one opponent remains standing. Below him, the sturdy warrior lies broken and bloodied, his defiance finally crushed under the weight of the Second Academy's cruelty as he gasps for breath on the cold ground. His predatory presence finally breaks the last of their spirit, as the remaining girl collapses into a state of pure terror. With tears streaming down her face and her body trembling uncontrollably, she gasps out a desperate plea of surrender, unable to endure the psychological pressure a moment longer. The official's voice rings out across the arena, declaring the decisive victory of the First Academy's duo. Sieg turns to leave without a second glance, his expression cold and detached, while Hildian hurries to keep pace with his brother's brisk stride. As they exit the combat floor, Elzina catches up to Hildian, her face lit with a boisterous, predatory grin. She playfully suggests a rendezvous for later, her energy a stark contrast to the brother's icy demeanor. He mutters a complaint about the brevity of the fight, feeling unsatisfied by the lack of violence. She simply laughs it off, giving him a reassuring pat and reminding him that more opportunities for carnage await in the rounds to come. The group moves through the vast, tiled corridors of the stadium, the echoes of their footsteps marking the end of their first trial. The conversation turns sour as she expresses her disdain for their brutal tactics, specifically their refusal to let their opponents yield. She questions why they would choose such a dull, one-sided approach when a proper fight would have been far more entertaining. He stops in his tracks, the air around him suddenly growing heavy with a cold, sharp tension. He calls out to her, his voice low and laced with a dangerous edge. He demands to know what she meant by her criticism, his eyes narrowing with irritation. She doesn't back down, retorting that dragging out a hopeless struggle is a waste of everyone's time and telling him to drop the arrogant act. His patience snaps, and he offers a chilling threat to dismantle her right there in the hallway. Instead of flinching, she meets his gaze with a fierce, unyielding stare, welcoming the challenge with a defiant smirk. The other brother steps between the two combatants, his hands raised in a placating gesture. He attempts to diffuse the explosive atmosphere with a light-hearted interjection. He explains that his brother's temperament is simply part of his nature, admitting that even he finds it difficult to manage. She huffs in annoyance, finally turning away but promising to hold them accountable for the delay later on. She had just finished her confrontation, but the twins, Sieg and Hildian, were already moving on. Sieg laughed off the tension, finding the situation amusing, while Hildian remained stoic, clearly annoyed by his brother's lack of seriousness. As they departed, a new figure watched from the shadows of the corridor. Andrich, a representative of the Second Academy, leaned against a wall with a relaxed, almost playful smile. He remarked on the lively nature of the festival, seemingly unbothered by the friction between the other schools. His gaze sharpened, focusing on the unfolding events with a keen, observant eye. To him, the chaos of the tournament was exactly what made such an event worthwhile. Outside, the atmosphere reached a fever pitch as the roar of the crowd echoed through the massive stone arena. The next match was about to begin, and the anticipation was palpable. Stepping into the light, Elzina prepared herself for the coming bout. Her opponent was a mountain of a man, a towering figure whose shadow loomed over her, signaling a fight of a completely different scale. From the sidelines, Neko and Lil watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide at the sheer size of the challenger. Even among the elite students, this man's physical presence was overwhelming, prompting whispers of disbelief about his age and strength. This was no ordinary student. He was the top-ranked warrior of the Fourth Academy. His expression was one of grim determination, his eyes fixed on the small but fierce woman before him. Lil observed that the Fourth Academy was clearly desperate, sending out their absolute strongest to ensure they didn't fall further behind. Neko could only watch, her concern for Elzina growing as the disparity in size became even more apparent. The giant spoke, his voice a low rumble as he addressed the previous match's brutality. He made it clear that he intended to settle the debt for his fallen comrade, while Elzina met his gaze with a defiant smirk, ready to take responsibility for her team's actions. With a thunderous signal, the battle erupted. She didn't hesitate, launching herself forward with a powerful strike, while the giant braced himself, his massive frame ready to absorb the impact of her opening gambit. She darts across the arena floor like a blur of motion, leaving her massive opponent struggling to keep pace with her speed. The giant growls in frustration at her nimbleness, but she merely offers a sharp, mocking grin, questioning if this meager display is truly all he has to offer. In response to her taunt, he brings his colossal blade down with a thunderous roar, intending to crush the agile fighter beneath the sheer weight of the metal. The impact is cataclysmic, sending a shockwave through the stadium and carving a deep crater into the stone floor. From the sidelines, Neko and Rebecca watch in horror, their breath catching as a thick cloud of dust obscures the point of impact. As the debris begins to settle, the giant's expression of triumph quickly curdles into one of confusion and dawning dread. He stares down to find that she has not been crushed. Instead, she has caught the edge of his massive weapon with her armored hands, holding the crushing weight at bay with impossible ease. With a predatory glint in her eyes, she remarks on how surprisingly light the blow felt, her confidence unshaken by the display of raw strength. The giant stammers in disbelief, unable to comprehend how his most powerful strike was neutralized without a scratch, while the spectators can only gape at the sheer impossibility of the feat. Her gaze narrows, focusing on the reflection of his terrified face in her own eyes as she tells him he isn't even worth the effort of a proper warm-up. Before he can react, she unleashes a devastating counterstrike, her powers surging forward with enough force to shatter the very steel of his weapon. The broken remains of the blade clatter to the ground, leaving the giant staring helplessly at his empty hilt while she stands composed in the distance, the undisputed master of the exchange. She looks down with cold indifference at her trembling opponent. She makes it clear that she has no interest in prolonged cruelty, bluntly advising the massive man to concede before things get worse. Overwhelmed by her sheer presence and the wreckage of his weapon, the giant can only stammer out his surrender. Following this swift capitulation, the official's voice rings out across the arena, formally declaring her the victor. She sheaths her blade with practiced ease, her expression remaining stoic as the crowd erupts in reaction to her dominant performance. With her victory secured, the official further announces that the Second Academy has officially earned their place in the finals. The news sends a wave of shock and excitement through the spectators and the other competitors, while she begins her calm walk back from the center of the stage. As she departs, she casts a final, provocative glance over her shoulder, a playful smirk dancing on her lips as she beckons for the next challenge. Watching her go, the young commoner can't help but mirror her confidence, his own face splitting into a wide, eager grin as he realizes the true level of competition awaiting him. The grand arena erupts in cheers as the announcer's voice booms across the stands, declaring the start of the final match between the First and Second Academies. Amidst the rising tension, Elzina turns to her teammate with a sharp, expectant look, noting that the moment they've been waiting for has finally arrived. She lets out a boisterous shout, pumping her fist with infectious energy as she encourages her allies to give it everything they've got. This surge of confidence is met with an enthusiastic response from Rebecca, who beams with excitement while Elzina assures her that the victory is as good as theirs. Nearby, Lil observes the opposing team, noting with a cold smirk that the matchup is a repeat of their very first encounter, a coincidence she finds particularly interesting. Her observation is interrupted by a young man in a military cap, whose face twists into a sickeningly predatory grin as he confesses his twisted delight in seeing strong-willed girls succumb to terror. He continues his taunts, prompting a sharp, dismissive retort from Lil, who finds his posturing utterly pathetic. Meanwhile, Rebecca watches the exchange with growing unease, questioning the cruelty he displayed toward the students of the Fourth Academy. The man's grin only widens, his eyes gleaming with malice as he dismisses the need for reasons, stating that his own satisfaction is the only justification he requires. His blatant disregard for others leaves Rebecca momentarily stunned, but she quickly refocuses as a teammate offers a word of thanks, finding strength in their shared purpose. With the pre-match tensions reaching a boiling point, the official steps forward to signal the start of the Vanguard battle, as the four combatants lock eyes, ready to unleash their power. He watches with a predatory gaze as the match ignites, his teammates lunging forward with a blur of intent. The twins mirror each other's assault, their blades clashing against the defensive stances of the First Academy's vanguard. Despite the ferocity of the opening gambit, the strike from one of the twins fails to find its mark, a rare miss that draws a mocking comment from his brother. The noble in the cap simply observes, unbothered by the minor setback. This unexpected lapse leaves the silver-haired warrior momentarily bewildered, her eyes wide as she tries to read her opponent's next move. He catches her gaze from the sidelines, a jagged, knowing smirk spreading across his face, as if he is savoring her confusion. The battle intensifies instantly, a whirlwind of steel and sparks as the combatants trade blows at a dizzying pace. The twins note their opponent's impressive speed with condescending hums, their eyes gleaming with a sadistic curiosity. Sensing a stalemate, the two brothers leap back to create distance, their breathing steady despite the high-octane exchange. While one grumbles in irritation at the lack of a quick victory, the other remains composed, urging his partner to maintain focus. They take a moment to evaluate their adversaries, acknowledging that the First Academy's mastery of fundamental swordsmanship makes them more troublesome than anticipated. It is a cold, calculated assessment of the challenge ahead. With a shared nod of understanding, the twins stand back to back, their presence suddenly heavy with a new, ominous energy. They decide it is time to stop playing and bring the confrontation to a swift, brutal end. From the sidelines, Neko senses a sudden shift in the atmosphere as the twins unleash their true power, manifesting massive, ornate armaments. One wields a colossal cannon while the other holds a jagged, imposing shield, their weapons known as the demon's right cannon and the demon's left shield. Seeing the shift in the tide, Lil narrows her eyes, recognizing the synchronized nature of their technique. She prepares her own counteroffensive, her hand tightening on her hilt as she readies for the coming storm. The dark-haired brawler, Rebecca, charges forward to crush their momentum, but her heavy strike is met by the immovable wall of the demonic shield. The wielder laughs at her effort, mocking her for losing sight of the true threat as the cannon begins to hum with lethal intent. He unleashes the command to fire, and the demon's right cannon erupts with a blinding flash of energy. Across the battlefield, Lil's voice rings out in a desperate warning for Rebecca to move before the blast connects. Following the explosive discharge, the ground shatters under the sheer force of the impact. Amidst the smoke and debris, the terrifying scale of the twins' combined power is laid bare, leaving the area in ruins. Emerging from the dust, the warrior grips her massive hammer, having narrowly avoided a direct hit by drawing her weapon in a split second. Watching from the sidelines, the sadistic noble marvels at her reflexes, noting how she managed such a feat in an instant. As the warrior stands her ground, Lil begins to piece together the mechanics of their opponent's strategy. She realizes that the shield absorbs the kinetic energy of an attack, which is then channeled directly into the cannon for a devastating counterstrike, a rare and dangerous synchronization between two individuals. While she processes the strategy, the warrior lunges forward, her heavy weapon trailing behind her as she closes the distance. Her opponents are momentarily surprised that she can move so fluidly while wielding such a cumbersome instrument of war. As she closes in, the sadistic noble interjects with a mocking laugh, swinging a heavy, chained weight with predatory grace. He sneers at her efforts, his weapon whistling through the air as it seeks to ensnare her and halt her momentum. The impact of his heavy chain-link weapon forces her back, the sheer weight of the blow rattling her bones. She grunts in pain, struggling to maintain her footing as her attacker effortlessly maneuvers the massive iron ball, mocking her for being weighed down by her own equipment. Seeing her comrade in such a dire position, Lil's expression hardens with resolve. She knows she cannot stand by any longer and prepares to join the fray to support the beleaguered warrior before the situation worsens.